Chapter 481, The Magic Spire. Shaltair's attention was immediately drawn to the central structure of the circular base, a towering stone spire. The spire, including its pointed top, stood at least 6 or 7 stories high. Despite its height, the spire's footprint was relatively small, occupying only about 100 square meters in the middle of the base. Shaltair could sense the spire's surface-absorbing magic power, which gathered and ascended until it burst forth from the top in a spray of magical fluorescent light, merging into the protective magic barrier above. If my guess is correct, that spire is the core of the protective magic, Shaltair mused. This place is even more fortified than we anticipated. It's not just a breeding base, it's practically a miniature wizard village. As she surveyed the scene below, Shaltair couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The facilities were so comprehensive that it suggested a significant number of wizards were stationed there. Even late at night, she could see 5 groups of wizards patrolling, each group consisting of 2 people. Including those patrolling the mountains outside the base, there were more than a dozen wizards on night duty alone. There would undoubtedly be more guards during the day, along with nurses, veterinarians, and business wizards, bringing the total to nearly 100 people. Fortunately, my lord was cautious enough to investigate in advance, Shaltair thought, wiping sweat from her brow. The manpower here is several times more than we estimated. If we had launched a surprise attack with just a few people, we might not have been able to retreat unscathed. Germany, as the headquarters of the Silver Spear, could muster an impressive number of wizards. If the 2 wizards' claims about a 6-month rotation were true, Shaltair estimated that hundreds of wizards were secretly working for the club throughout Germany. Many of these wizards might not even realize they were working for the Silver Spear, believing it to be a legitimate career. After carefully observing the base's layout, Shaltair began planning the surveillance setup. Ideally, she would position the surveillance from above, but there was no aerial carrier for monitoring spiders. Installing monitors on the dome might trigger alarms, and she lacked Anduin's alchemy skills to link the monitors with the protective circle's magic circuit. Therefore, she had to install them on the ground. The spire is much higher than the other buildings, making it a suitable point for wide-angle surveillance, Shaltair decided. I can place 4 surveillance spiders there to overlook the park. One monitor needs to face the main entrance of the spire. Perhaps my lord can find a way to breach the barrier without triggering the defenses by studying this alchemy core. Installing a monitor on the spire would be ideal, but it's risky. The tower gate is completely closed now, so I'll need to find a good opportunity. The entertainment area, with its high traffic, requires 2 monitors, one of which must face the bar. The residential area for the guards also needs coverage. To get a clear view, I'll need to use diagonal road perspectives, requiring at least 6 cameras. The zoo area will need even more monitors to observe the main ring road and determine their patrol patterns, which will require another 5 cameras. In total, I'll need 18 cameras, leaving 2 as spares. Over the next few nights, Shaltair's plan was meticulous, ensuring comprehensive surveillance of the entire base. She knew that careful observation and strategic placement of the monitors were crucial for their mission's success. I can also wear the camera to take some overhead shots for adults from the air, Shaltair mused. Since joining Anduin, she had not only served as a product designer for the firm, but also received extensive training in reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance, stealth, and combat. After a brief observation, she had already formulated a basic plan. Without wasting any time, Shaltair took action. She swooped down, skillfully avoiding the sight of the patrolling personnel, and landed steadily on the steeple in the center of the area. Very well, no alarms triggered. It seems they haven't installed any warning magic on the outside of the tower, she noted with a reckless smile. Unlike Anduin, Shaltair was not overly cautious. Though her actions seemed risky, successful adventures often brought significant rewards. After working for a while, Shaltair set up monitoring spiders facing 4 directions. She then spent the next hour carefully avoiding the patrolling personnel and positioning all the monitoring spiders in their preset locations. Once she finished, Shaltir returned to the Reem cattle stable where she had initially entered. Although the chances were slim, she hoped to find a way to exit smoothly. However, after waiting for the time to arrive, Shaltir still couldn't locate the entry and exit hole in the barrier. Despite knowing that Anduin had opened the hole, she couldn't accurately find the small, 20-centimeter-wide gap on such a high wall. This discovery frustrated her, but she quickly pulled herself together. She still had a backup plan and needed to find a relatively safe hiding place. Staying in such an open-air environment was too risky. Outside, Anduin realized that Shaltir hadn't returned on time. He understood that she probably couldn't find her way back. The gap was so subtle that only someone with his sharp perception could recognize it. Fortunately, they had prepared a backup plan. However, with Shaltir trapped inside the breeding base, she needed to act quickly to avoid exposure and danger. Luckily, after opening the gap, I managed to get in touch with the little Thunderbird. With my instructions, it should recognize Shaltir as an ally. I hope Shaltir realizes this. It's a pity that the signal interference here is too strong to make direct contact with her, Anduin thought, shaking his head helplessly. After an hour of research, he was still unsure if he could break through the protective shield without alerting the opponent. He could only hope that Shaltir would provide him with enough information from the inside. With a plan in mind, Anduin quickly evacuated the area. He needed to check the other two breeding bases to determine if their defense forces were consistent. After working all night, Anduin returned to his room in Dudden Tower, feeling a bit tired as dawn approached. His investigation revealed that the three breeding bases were essentially the same. The security methods on the periphery and the large protective barriers used to hide the bases in the center were uniformly specified. The only difference was that two of the three bases were located in West Germany and occupied a very large area. The third base, located in East Germany, had a noticeably smaller coverage area. It seems that the Golden Snidget's goal is indeed West Germany. He plans to split the whole of West Germany and make it a natural umbrella and breeding area for the club, Anduin concluded. After the split is completed, the base in East Germany will also be moved to Sidjo. Anduin took stock of what he had gained tonight, calmly imitating the thoughts of Snidget. He then found Hog, who had been monitoring the surveillance. "How is it? Any progress?" he asked. "There is no abnormality in the headquarters and several other silver spear guns, but surveillance spiders number 2138 were activated. Shaltir appeared in front of the camera in the form of a bat. The place where she was spotted is the Silver Spear breeding base." "Goodness, that place is really big and intimidating," Hogg reported. He was sitting in front of a monitoring platform, dozens of monitors lit up in front of him, displaying various images. "Very good. It seems that Shaltir has done a commendable job infiltrating this time. Has she delivered any news to you?" Anduin asked, staring at the display screen inside the base and nodding in satisfaction. "Indeed, but are you really okay with letting her hide in that base alone, ni?" Hogg had obviously learned about Anduin's plan from the images sent back by Shaltir and couldn't help but express his concern. He then handed a piece of parchment to Anduin. "This is Shaltir's report. It seems that this breeding base is larger than we expected, and the number of people inside is beyond imagination." Anduin took the parchment and read it carefully, then glanced at the monitor. "Is Milan Clement there? Maybe we can use this person as a breakthrough. The scale of the breeding base is indeed larger than expected. It seems these silver spears are building it into a permanent resource base. In addition to breeding magical animals, it may also serve the function of training wizards." "Are they planning to train an army again?" Hogg was taken aback upon hearing this. He knew what Grindelwald had done in the past. Is the Silver Spear going to repeat the same mistakes? This possibility cannot be ruled out, and the priority of destroying these bases is now higher, Anduin said, frowning slightly. He then looked at Hogg again. "How is the radio inside? Can we hear any movement?" "Most of the monitors are working normally, but the ones on the steeple near the center of the base have been disturbed, and basically no sound can come out. Fortunately, Shaltir is quite smart. She ran to the fringe area specifically at this time and also proposed to find that little Thunderbird. Hogg said, surprisingly praising Shaltir. End of this chapter. Chapter 482, Trouble. Well, her decision is not what I expected. I have established a spiritual connection with Little Thunderbird before. Its mental state was not very good, but after my communication, it has been able to cooperate with our actions. It sees Shaltir and will cover her later, Anduin said, already quite satisfied with Shaltir's performance. What he needed to do now was to crack the magic barrier of this base as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be difficult to manage, given the size of the base. Initially, based on his experience in England, Anduin thought there were only a few dozen people in this breeding base, and he could call a dozen people from England to take it down. However, he now realized that things might not be that simple. After pondering for a moment, Anduin looked down at Hogg. Next, put the monitoring center in this breeding base and draw a top view of the entire base as soon as possible. I need to know the total number of people, including combatants and non-combatants. Also, collect the morning, noon, and evening routines of the guards, as well as the frequency of patrols, routes, and where they live. Additionally, gather information about the magical animals, including their types and quantities. This is crucial for subsequent containment and treatment. Pay close attention to Shaltir's movements. She will most likely use surveillance spider number 39 to contact us. If she is found to be in danger, contact me immediately. If she is exposed, we can abandon the mission, and I will launch a direct attack. In the next 2 days, I will find a way to get in touch with Milan Claremont and record his video. Keep an eye out for him in the breeding base. He might be the key to breaking the magic circle. Anduin assigned tasks to Hogg in an orderly manner, while solemnly staring at the picture facing the gate of the magic spire. To crack the barrier, he needed to understand its internal structure. With this in mind, Anduin took out a monitoring spider from his belongings, walked into the alchemy laboratory thoughtfully, and began tinkering without rest. Meanwhile, Shaltir, who was staying in the breeding base, no longer dared to be as presumptuous as she had been at night. At dawn, the entire base seemed to come alive, with a large number of wizards emerging from their residences and quickly taking up their posts. There were more than twice as many guards as Shaltir had seen at night. In addition to protecting the base, these wizards spent a significant amount of energy on the magical animals. After all, a large number of extremely dangerous magical animals were imprisoned here, and no one knew when they might suddenly go berserk. The risk of working here was very high, and they could be attacked at any time. The base was also equipped with a large number of non-combat wizards proficient in magical zoology, responsible for the medical treatment, breeding, and even training of these animals. Additionally, there were quite a few ordinary wizards who acted as handymen. Some of them were not even wizards, just muggle spouses or squibs. They served as assistants to the magizoologists, equivalent to medical nurses, or helped in the living quarters, doing odd jobs in the wizard shops, or handling cleaning, cooking, carrying, and other tasks. Shaltir quickly counted the muggles she could see and realized that her estimate from the previous night might have been too conservative. Including these muggles, the total number of people in the base was likely more than 200. At this moment, Shaltir, who was hiding under the eaves of a residential house, continued to observe and gather information. Shaltir couldn't help but be dumbfounded when she saw the vibrant scene in front of her. It was the first time she had witnessed wizards, muggles, and squibs coexisting so harmoniously. In England, most wizards harbored a deep-rooted disdain for muggles, and few were willing to interact with them, let alone live and work under the same roof. In contrast, Germany and France, two relatively progressive countries, had a more accepting attitude towards muggles and squibs. There were surprisingly many half-blood wizards, and even many pure-blood families had grown accustomed to the presence of muggles. This acceptance had led to a higher number of wizards in these countries compared to the United Kingdom. However, Germany and France also had their issues with the Secrecy Act, though their reasons differed from the extreme pure-blood families led by Death Eaters in Britain. They opposed the Secrecy Act because they desired closer contact with Muggle society and more open communication. They felt constrained by the inability to live openly and freely. On the other hand, Death Eaters instinctively discriminated against Muggles, believing they were unworthy of the vast lands and resources they possessed. They sought to conquer and rule Muggles, turning them into slaves. Despite their differing motivations, both factions disliked the Secrecy Act. This shared disdain meant that any revolution against the Secrecy Act would likely garner significant support. Their goals, though different, were surprisingly aligned. In Shaltair's eyes, Jinfacia's ability to create such a harmonious breeding base was admirable. However, this harmony also made her wary of Jinfacia's true intentions. The most terrifying individuals in the world were not the villains who used violence and cruelty, as their actions would only incite resentment and hostility. Instead, those who used rules and legal means to achieve their ambitions were far more dangerous. They would weave a web of lies and interests, gradually manipulating everyone like boiling frogs in warm water. These individuals often appeared more fair and friendly than official institutions, earning trust and love from many wizards over time. If someone tried to expose their conspiracy or oppose them, they would face hostility and resistance from the majority. Shaltair feared that if Golden Snidget succeeded in splitting Germany, these breeding bases might eventually become legal institutions, using the entire country to provide a continuous supply of blood for those pursuing immortality in the shadows. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Golden Snidget's ability to manipulate people's hearts far surpassed that of the Thunderbird, who only knew how to kill and destroy. At the same time, Shaltair began to worry about Anduin. It wasn't his safety that concerned her. She knew that with Anduin's level of caution, he would ensure success in whatever he undertook. Her concern was for the many people in the base. If the base were to be wiped out, how would they deal with the aftermath? How would they explain it to the survivors? There were over 200 people in the base, including many Muggles and Squibs who were likely unaware of the true nature of the base. They couldn't kill them all, but letting them go would risk exposing the secret. However, keeping them all was also impractical due to their sheer number. To hide, and so many that Jin Snidget can use legitimate and legal means to track them down and even arrest them. You must know that these people all have their own families and have legal identities. So many people disappearing all at once, involving so many wizards, could cause international disputes if not handled properly. Even in the eyes of the people living in the breeding base, Anduin and the others may be seen as intruders, bad guys who disturb their work and life. It should be noted that these people are not forced to work here. They receive generous remuneration and benefits, and they have not abused or killed those magical animals. On the surface, they are not even breaking the law, making it difficult to convict them. Raiding such a breeding base under these circumstances could make Shaltair and the others public enemies and completely strip them of their legitimacy. Legitimacy may seem trivial, but it can guide public opinion and label others as righteous or evil. This Golden Snidget is not only sinister, but the breeding base he established. Ed can also provide them with sufficient resources while holding hundreds of wizards and Muggles as hostages. Shaltair even estimated that Golden Snidget deliberately placed so many legal people in the breeding base because the more people involved, the safer it would appear on the surface. A breeding base with few people is just an illegal den, and destroying it is seen as eliminating harm for the people. But a breeding base with a large number of people, to a certain extent, becomes a legal wizard community, and random attacks would make them full-fledged public enemies. At that point, they themselves would be seen as terrorists. Therefore, in Shaltair's eyes, this breeding base has changed from a luscious sweet pastry to a big trouble that could make them overturn at any time. Thinking of this, Shaltair couldn't help but shudder and felt even more uneasy. I don't know if my lord is aware of this. I don't want to become a wanted criminal in Germany, Shaltair thought in annoyance. Then she realized what was wrong. No, if my lord really thinks about this and then chooses to give up the plan to attack this base, what should I do? Do I really have to live here for a long time? At this moment, Shaltair felt that her brain was a mess. She hoped that Anduin would not fall into this quagmire, but also didn't want to be locked up here and lose her freedom, so she was immediately conflicted. Forget it. Now I can only pray that the adults can think of a way to deal with it properly. I'd better leave it alone and finish my own work first. Shaltir shook her head violently. Let Anduin worry about such a headache. Anyway, when the sky falls, a tall man will help. She is not the kind of person who is good at thinking. Her biggest dream is to become a carefree cook. End of this chapter. Chapter 483. Long live the captain. Shaltir was feeling famished, having not eaten for half a day. She took out a monitoring spider and placed it on her forehead, using it as a mobile camera. She then reached for some blood sausage from her tactical vest to fill her stomach. However, her attention was suddenly drawn to a scene unfolding on the street in front of her. She was at the outermost edge of the residential area, near tall buildings that resembled magical animal hospitals and barns. Several wizards were opening the door of one of these buildings and pushing out a large iron cage containing a thunderbird. Is this the little thunderbird that the adults have been tracking? They kept it in the confinement room, Shaltir thought, her spirits lifting. She had been searching for this thunderbird all night, scouring every breeding compartment in the base without success. She had even narrowly avoided becoming supper for some of the more vicious magical animals. The base housed many high-risk creatures. Shaltir had seen 8 different types of fire dragons, not to mention the fierce griffins, chimeras, and manticores. After spotting the thunderbird, her hunger was forgotten. She quickly moved along the eaves and ceilings of the breeding compartments, following the wizards who were escorting the thunderbird. The wizards pushed the iron cage through several turns in the base before stopping outside a compartment covered with a weather blanket in the central ring. One of the wizards cautiously approached the cage, preparing to open it, while the others nervously drew their wands and stood guard on either side of the road. Damn it, we just settled it down today, and now we're sending it back to Barn No. 26? Aren't you afraid it will go crazy again? If it does, more than 1 or 2 people might get hurt. Last time, my face was almost scratched trying to subdue it, one of the wizards grumbled. We have no choice. Shed number 4 is needed to house a poisonous leopard today. You know how dangerous that magical animal is. If we're not careful, it could poison all the surrounding creatures, so we must clear the area, another wizard explained, shaking his head helplessly. But don't worry too much. The guard on night watch in Shed Null 4 said the Thunderbird's manic symptoms have subsided since last night. These magical animals are always unpredictable. When they're in a bad mood, they go crazy. This Thunderbird is manageable compared to the Ukrainian Iron Belly we're dealing with in Shed 34. The small animals brought in last night disturbed it, and now it breathes fire at anyone it sees. The nurse who brought it food this morning was almost burned to death, another wizard added. The complaining wizard's face turned pale. Oh my God, that's terrible news. I'd rather face 3 young Thunderbirds at once than deal with a Ukrainian Iron Belly. I think Lord Claremont should consider giving us a raise. I feel like I'll end up in the mouths of these magical animals sooner or later. Jimmy, stop complaining, the team leader shouted. Lord Claremont has treated us well enough. Otherwise, you'd still be doing odd jobs in the tavern at Dudden House. Stop talking nonsense and settle this Thunderbird quickly. I'm not complaining, Captain. I just think our daily work is much more dangerous than those guys who... Why do good things always have to be given to those guys first? Jimmy grumbled, his voice full of resentment. What good things are you talking about? The wizard in the team looked puzzled for a moment before realization dawned on him. Ah, you mean the protective vests they got, right? Exactly. Matthew, who was on patrol last night, told me those vests can automatically cast the humanoid iron armor curse. With that kind of equipment, we'd be much safer while looking after magical animals, Jimmy said, winking conspiratorially at the others. By the way, don't tell anyone I told you this. It's a little secret Matthew shared with me. Matthew? That big mouth again, the leader wizard shook his head in exasperation. Matthew, being the nephew of His Excellency Claremont, was often idle and had a tendency to gossip. Is this true, Captain? Are the vests really that magical? I thought they were just new uniforms, one of the wizards asked eagerly. When will we get such equipment? Another chimed in. All right, all right. The team leader raised his voice to get their attention, then continued in a calmer tone. Yes, it's true, but those vests are expensive and are currently prioritized for the patrol team because their tasks are considered more dangerous. Dangerous, my foot, Jimmy muttered angrily. Captain, you know as well as I do that patrol work is the easiest in our park. I've been here long enough to see that. When have those patrols ever been in real danger? They just stroll around, enjoy the scenery, and get paid more than us. We're the ones who face real risks every day, dealing with magical beasts. Captain, Jimmy turned to the leader wizard with a sincere look. Can you talk to Lord Claremont about this? We do the hard work here. I don't want to lose an arm or a leg. Haven't you seen how badly John was bitten by those billywig bugs a few days ago? Jimmy's complaints resonated with the others, who began to voice their agreement. That's right, Captain. Why does the patrol team always get preferential treatment? If they think the patrol team is more dangerous, let them switch places with us. Captain, if we had better equipment, it would be safer for everyone. Remember when you almost got thrown by that poison horn beast last time? The leader wizard's face grew more troubled as he listened, but he couldn't deny the truth in their words. He, too, dealt with the dangers of magical animals daily and felt the imbalance in how benefits were distributed. The collective frustration of his team gave him the courage to consider speaking up. All right, he finally nodded. I'll mention it to Lord Claremont when he shows up tonight. But if he gets angry, don't leave me hanging. No problem, Captain. If His Excellency Claremont asks, we'll say it's everyone's opinion. Long live the Captain. Tonight, I'll treat you to a glass of preserved flame whiskey, a special product from East Germany, one of the wizards cheered, lifting the spirits of the group. You can't buy it even if you want to now, the captain said. That's how it should be, Captain. I believe His Excellency Claremont will not blame you for a reasonable proposal, one of the wizards replied. Hearing that the leader wizard agreed, all the wizards around, including Jimmy, couldn't help but cheer loudly. All right, let's get to work. We still have to deal with that Ukrainian ironbelly later. Don't let extreme joy turn into sorrow. It won't be good if you get burnt by the fire dragon, the team leader wizard said, feeling his authority restored. He immediately began giving orders. No problem, Captain. Don't worry about it, Captain. If you're in danger, I'll jump in to help you as soon as possible. The spirited group of wizards got busy with smiles and non-stop chatter, eager to lift the leader wizard to the sky. Meanwhile, the little Thunderbird behaved very peacefully, and all the wizards managed to settle it back into their hut without any effort. They even attributed this success to the captain's understanding of righteousness, believing it symbolized that their action to fight for welfare at night would go smoothly. Shaltair, who had been observing from the ceiling, saw everything happening in front of the shed. With the number 39 monitoring Spider on her head, it wasn't surprising that Anduin and Hog from the outside world could also receive this information. Will that Milan Claremont appear at night? It seems that His Excellency Claremont comes to the base every day or every few days. Tonight, I might be able to follow the leader wizard and find out more about him, Shaltair thought, rolling her eyes and secretly paying attention. But the most important thing at this moment was to connect with the little Thunderbird. He believed that with Anduin's cunning, he would not mention her to the Thunderbird, so she wasn't very worried about being attacked by it. In contrast, she felt that the team of wizards in front of her might need to be more careful about their own safety, especially since she was the one who had angered the Ukrainian ironbelly last night, and that dragon had a bad temper. Chapter 484, Little Thunderbird. After the team of wizards responsible for escorting the Thunderbirds left and ensured there was no one around, Shaltair cautiously approached the shed, using the outer weather blanket for cover. As soon as she slipped inside, her vision blurred momentarily. The interior had been transformed into a scene reminiscent of the American wilderness. The shed, housing the small ptarmigans, boasted an expansive interior, likely enhanced by numerous applications of the scar-stretching curse. The sky above appeared to stretch nearly hundreds of meters high. The little Thunderbird inside the shed was now larger than an adult lion, making the space more than adequate for its needs. After taking in her surroundings, Shaltir began to search for the little Thunderbird, pawing at the weather blanket. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed before her eyes, and a massive bird head appeared, its falcon-like eyes fixed on her. "Hi," Shaltir stammered, taken aback by the Thunderbird's speed. She had been spotted before she could even react. Facing the bird's sharp gaze, she felt as if she were being targeted by a natural predator. Instinctively, she greeted it, standing there blankly, drenched in cold sweat. She couldn't be sure if Anduin had communicated with the Thunderbird or if it had the intelligence to recognize her from a previous encounter. She feared it might see her as a snack. However, despite its piercing eyes, the Thunderbird made no aggressive moves. It seemed to recognize Shaltir's bat form, recalling the kind voice it had heard in its mind the previous night. For several days, the little Thunderbird had sensed a faint spiritual connection, giving it a feeling of intimacy, reminiscent of its former family. This connection had driven it to try and escape its cage, though it was too weak to resist its captors. Just the previous night, the telepathic connection had become clear, and the voice had explained the situation, urging the Thunderbird to remain calm and await rescue. The voice had also instructed it to help any bat behaving strangely, as it would be a friend and ally. The little Thunderbird tilted its head, observing Shaltir's odd behavior. Convinced she was the friend mentioned by the voice, it extended its front paws and gently grabbed her. "This is a friend and one of our own, so let her stay with her baby," it thought. Carrying the still shocked Shaltir, the Thunderbird returned to its nest, built by the wizards on a rock, and placed her in a nearby corner. The corner was filled with gnawed bones, forming a cage-like structure that trapped Shaltir inside. "No, brother, what are you doing?" Shaltir thought, realizing the Thunderbird must have communicated with Anduin. But now, stuffed into a pile of bones, she began to doubt her situation. What did this mean? It looked as if she was being locked up as a spare snack. In the little Thunderbird's pure thoughts, sharing its treasure with a good friend seemed like the right thing to do. The Thunderbird's earlier actions seemed to have been misunderstood. It had only intended to play, but Shaltir had perceived it as a threat. Realizing it might have been too rough, the Thunderbird extended its sharp claws in her direction, attempting to convey an apology. However, from Shaltir's perspective, it looked like the Thunderbird was about to scratch her to death. Desperately, she thrashed in the pile of bones, trying to escape its clutches. The Thunderbird, misinterpreting her frantic movements as playful energy, chirped happily and pawed even more vigorously. Meanwhile, Hog, who was monitoring the scene from a distance, couldn't help but laugh. "Ha ha! Shaltir is such a silly bat. That little Thunderbird just wants to play, but she's scared out of her wits." Over time, Shaltir came to understand that the Thunderbird wasn't hostile. Its way of showing affection, though, was quite overwhelming. Despite this, Shaltir found a silver lining. She was safe in the number 26 barn where the Thunderbird resided. This allowed her to finally rest. After filling her stomach, she slept in the Thunderbird's nest until nightfall. Rejuvenated, Shaltir remembered the news she had heard in the morning. Tonight, she might have the chance to follow the leader wizard and find the manager, Merlin Claremont. Without much hesitation, she said goodbye to the Thunderbird, climbed out of the shed, and flew into the night sky, searching for the wizard. Fortunately, the base was bustling with birds at night, so her presence went unnoticed. After half an hour of hovering, she spotted the wizard leader. However, he looked different from the morning. His plain work clothes were now covered in mud and grass clippings, and there were bloodstains on his chest and arms. "Is he injured? But he seems to be moving fine," Shaltir thought, puzzled by his appearance. Now wasn't the time to dwell on it. She needed to keep an eye on him and figure out Merlin Claremont's movements. She swooped down, landing on the eaves closest to him, and followed closely. The wizard seemed to have just finished a long day's work. Shaltir watched as he walked dejectedly into a bar in the residential area and ate his dinner alone. He didn't communicate with anyone, and the team members who had been with him earlier were nowhere to be seen. It seems Merlin Claremont isn't in the bar, and something has changed. Even his team members are gone. Didn't they plan to meet here tonight? Shaltair worried that this sudden change might disrupt the wizard's original plan. If he changed his mind, she would have wasted her time. Just as she was frowning, the leader wizard walked out of the bar and stood at the door, looking melancholic. His expression changed several times in a few minutes, as if he was deep in thought. Finally, he seemed to make up his mind. His expression became resolute, and he walked towards the center of the residential area. Seeing this, Shaltair knew she had to follow him closely. Shaltair followed closely behind, trailing the wizard leader as they navigated the winding paths of the dormitory area. Eventually, they arrived at an unremarkable house nestled within the intersection. The wizard leader paused, taking 2 deep breaths before ascending the steps and knocking on the door. "Who is it?" came a voice from inside after a brief moment. "It's me, Nathan, the captain of the second team of the maintenance crew," Nathan called out, his voice betraying his nervousness. "What do you need?" a female voice responded from within. "Yes, Miss Gale, I need to speak with Lord Claremont about something important," Nathan stammered, clearly anxious. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged witch with short hair. She looked at Nathan curiously. "Is it urgent? Lord Claremont's time is very valuable." Nathan hesitated, his nerves getting the better of him. He struggled to find the right words. It wasn't exactly an emergency, but having mustered the courage to come here, he didn't want to leave empty-handed. Seeing Nathan's discomfort, Gale's tone softened. "All right, don't be so nervous. Lord Claremont isn't a man-eating tiger. I remember you, Nathan. You've been with us for 3 years, and this is the first time I've seen you come to see Lord Claremont alone." She stepped aside to let him in. "You're in luck today. Lord Claremont just finished dinner. He should have some time to speak with you now. He's in his office on the 2nd floor. You know the way." "Thank you, Miss Gale. You're always so considerate," Nathan said, visibly relieved. He thanked her repeatedly before stepping inside. Meanwhile, Shaltair, who had been eavesdropping from the rooftop, heard the entire exchange. Knowing that Lord Claremont was on the 2nd floor, she deftly moved along the roof, peering into each window in search of him. End of this chapter. Chapter 485. Claremont. After searching for a while, Shaltair finally spotted a formally dressed wizard through a lighted window. The wizard, who appeared to be in his 50s or 60s, had a goatee and a dignified appearance. He was seated behind a desk with an empty dinner plate beside him, engrossed in some documents. Shaltair's luck was favorable. Due to the tight security around the breeding base, the people inside seemed less cautious, and no protective magic was set up in the house. The windows were all open, allowing Shaltair to eavesdrop easily. Knowing that this person was important within the breeding base, she hoped to gather valuable information from him. Without hesitation, she released the last monitoring spider in her hand, carefully controlling it to move along the window into the room. She positioned it in a hidden corner with a wide view. As she was busy with this, there was a knock on the office door. "Come in!" A majestic yet soft voice called out from Milan Claremont, who was seated at the desk. "Your Excellency Claremont, I'm sorry to disturb you so late," Nathan said, gently opening the door. He held the doorknob with one hand and respectfully stroked his chest with the other as he stepped inside. "Ah, it's Nathan. Come in and sit down. Sorry, I just finished dinner, so the room is still a bit messy," Claremont said, recognizing Nathan immediately and greeting him warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Claremont," Nathan replied, visibly relaxing after hearing Claremont's greeting. He walked into the room with measured steps. Sit down. You've been an old employee in the park. No need to be so reserved," Claremont said with a smile, gesturing to the seat in front of him. He then walked to the wine cabinet next to the desk and tilted his head to look at Nathan. "Would you like a glass of whiskey?" Yes, Lord Claremont," Nathan nodded, still somewhat reserved as he sat down. It seemed that Lord Claremont was in a good mood today, and Nathan hoped the other party would agree to his request. "What's the matter, Nathan? You don't seem to be in a very good condition. Have you encountered any troubles? I remember you've been working diligently and hard since you came to the park. Today, you actually came to me deliberately. There must be something special," Claremont said gently as he handed the wine glass to Nathan. He was very perceptive and could see Nathan's discomfort, indicating that there was something difficult to say. Was it a request for a salary advance? Or perhaps a leave of absence? Maybe a dispute within the team? Claremont briefly considered a few possibilities and then looked at Nathan leisurely. He was always generous to serious and diligent subordinates. Ah, that's true. Today, the second team of our maintenance crew encountered an accident while dealing with an enraged Ukrainian iron belly, Nathan said with a sigh of melancholy. Jimmy and another team member were seriously injured and are still in the hospital. Really? Claremont immediately showed a worried expression. How are they doing now? Are their lives in danger? Jimmy's upper body was burned by the Ukrainian iron belly, and the others were also scratched to varying degrees. The blood on my clothes belongs to them, Nathan said, sighing again. Oh my God, I haven't had time to read today's briefing. I didn't expect such a thing to happen, Claremont said, looking genuinely saddened. If necessary, I can arrange a unified meeting for your second team and give you some time off to spend with your team members. Nathan shook his head immediately. Thank you, Your Excellency Claremont, for your generosity, but what I want to discuss is not about our team's condition. The rest of our members are in good health and can continue working. Oh, if that's the case, why do you want to see me? Claremont raised an eyebrow curiously, then reassured him. If you're worried about their condition, I can assure you they will receive the best care. The park will also cover the cost of their treatment. I don't doubt that. After all, it's not the first time we've been injured. The doctors in the park always manage to help us recover, Nathan replied, shaking his head. He then looked at Claremont solemnly. Your Excellency Claremont, what I want to ask is, can you equip our maintenance team with some protective gear? As you have seen, dealing with these magical animals in the park is no less dangerous than patrolling outside. Nathan was a bit apprehensive, suggesting this in a roundabout way. He had promised his team members that morning that he would ask Claremont for advice. In truth, he was more reluctant than eager, being an honest wizard who didn't dare to confront someone as influential as Claremont. But an incident later that day, while maintaining the Ukrainian iron belly, Dragon's Shed, changed his mind. The dragon had gone berserk, spewing fire everywhere, and nearly escaped from Shed 36. Fortunately, they were working with the third team at the time. With everyone's combined efforts, they managed to subdue the dragon, but several team members were injured. After this incident, Nathan realized just how close they were to danger and resolved to speak to Claremont. Are you referring to those tactical vests? Claremont immediately understood what Nathan was asking for. Yes, that equipment would allow everyone to work in a safer environment, Nathan said, smiling and nodding as Claremont grasped his meaning so quickly. Is this your idea alone, or is it a common request from everyone? Claremont asked calmly, not giving an immediate answer. Everyone thinks so, Mr. Claremont. Our maintenance team faces danger more frequently than the patrols, Nathan replied sincerely, sensing a glimmer of hope. I see, Claremont nodded, but still didn't give a direct answer. Instead, he asked, regarding these tactical vests, I should have told you during the meeting to keep them secret from your subordinates. How did they find out about them? Nathan immediately distanced himself from any blame. Your Excellency Claremont, I would never disobey your orders. The reason my team members know about the tactical vests is because of Matthew. He revealed it to everyone. Matthew? Claremont frowned. Why was it always this kid? Hearing that his troublesome nephew was causing issues again made him angry. He didn't doubt Nathan's honesty. This team leader was known for his integrity. However, those tactical vests were not easy to come by. The last time the club's leaders distributed them, he had to put in a lot of effort to secure an extra set from the other two parks. So, those lower-level employees already know about the tactical vests? Claremont felt a surge of annoyance. The tactical vests were indeed valuable, capable of significantly enhancing their strength. Claremont knew that revealing too much could lead to unnecessary conflicts within the park. That's why he had instructed the middle-level managers to keep things under wraps. Unfortunately, Matthew, the fool, had messed up. Claremont regretted promising Matthew's mother that he would look after him. Nathan noticed Claremont's persistent questioning and decided to answer honestly. I think so, but only my team members knew about it this morning. I've already told them to keep quiet and not spread the word, but I'm not sure about Matthew. Okay, I understand, Claremont replied, knowing how futile it was to try and control rumors. It might have already spread throughout the park. He frowned, but then softened his expression as he looked at Nathan. Nathan, I appreciate your concern for your teammates and your willingness to speak on their behalf. It shows great leadership. But, Claremont paused, his expression becoming more earnest. I hope you understand my position. Although the park is doing well, we are essentially working for those big companies, helping them raise magical animals. Our funds are limited, and those tactical vests are not readily available on the market. Our superior organization provided them as a benefit. We don't have many, so Claremont's words were carefully chosen to express his predicament. Outside the window, Shaltier, who had been eavesdropping, frowned. Helping big companies breed magical animals? Is this how they deceive their employees? Shaltier's intuition told her that this information could be crucial in dealing with these ordinary wizards, but she couldn't quite piece it all together yet. End of this chapter. Chapter 486. Difficulty. But Nathan could hear Claremont's refusal, but he was still a little unwilling. Perhaps it was Claremont's gentle attitude that gave him the motivation to fight for it again. Your Excellency Claremont, I understand your difficulties. I don't expect miracles. I know it's challenging to add such powerful equipment to the maintenance team in a short period of time, Nathan began, his voice tinged with desperation. But don't we have some ready-made equipment on hand? Nathan paused, gathering his thoughts. Actually, many people can see that the maintenance team often faces more risks than the patrols. Enough, Claremont interrupted sharply. He understood Nathan's point, but was unwilling to reallocate the tactical vests assigned to the patrol team. The patrol team was responsible for the security of the entire base. Although they mostly dealt with minor issues, like handling muggles who accidentally wandered in, their presence was crucial. Claremont had even placed his nephew in the patrol team, knowing it was relatively safe. However, Claremont also knew the patrol team's importance. They were the base's first line of defense, akin to a match in winter or a reserve water source in the desert. Even if their equipment was rarely used, it was absolutely necessary. Especially now, when the higher-ups placed great importance on the breeding base, which relied on smuggling magical animals. These higher-ups were ruthless, and any negligence could be fatal. Claremont's demeanor shifted from amiable to stern. He gave Nathan a fierce look, warning him that the patrol team's configuration was non-negotiable. I'm sorry, my lord. I didn't mean that. Nathan stammered, realizing his mistake. He sat awkwardly, his hands nervously kneading each other. Hey! Claremont sighed, his anger dissipating. He spoke softly. Nathan, the patrol team ensures everyone's safety in the park. Our organization is a large, internationally recognized company with many enemies. We have numerous precious magical animals that could easily attract criminals. We're also close to a Muggle city, and any exposure could violate the Secrecy Act. So, while the patrol team may not seem as hard and dangerous as the maintenance team, their responsibilities are crucial, Claremont explained earnestly. Nathan nodded, though it was unclear how much he absorbed. Claremont had repeated this speech many times, and most employees had become immune to it. Some could even recite it backward, much like students tuning out a teacher's lecture. This disconnect stemmed from information asymmetry and differing priorities. What the employees cared about was often different from what the higher-ups deemed important. The imbalance between income and payment, and whether the boss has a partial view, was a topic of concern among the maintenance team. It was clear to them that Claremont showed some bias, and even Nathan, who had always been honest, began to harbor such thoughts. Claremont, experienced and perceptive, noticed Nathan's discontent and realized that his advice had fallen on deaf ears. However, Claremont felt helpless. He couldn't reveal the truth, that they were actually working for a group of international smugglers. This job was precarious, and those patrols were actually from the Ministry of Magic. To be a member of the park's patrol team, the most crucial quality was not strength, but loyalty. Only those who were completely trustworthy and understood their position could take on this important task. The best way to handle such contradictions would be to work in shifts, allowing everyone the opportunity to do patrol work. But Claremont knew this was impossible. Some secrets could never be disclosed to the ordinary wizards in the park. Considering that the maintenance team already knew about the tactical vests, Nathan needed to bring back some good news. Otherwise, the conflict between the patrol team and the maintenance team would escalate, complicating future park management. Claremont immediately adopted a Khan's irate expression. "Well, Nathan, I understand your difficulties. Dealing with those magical animals every day is really stressful," Claremont said. "The patrol team also has their responsibilities. I can't transfer all their resources to you, but maybe I can find other ways to help. Give me some time, and I'll see if I can get more support from the superiors, perhaps some tactical vests or other substitutes." Claremont's words were essentially a blank check, similar to the promises Nathan had made to his team earlier. However, when faced with ambiguous answers, people often prefer to believe the information that benefits them. Nathan's face lit up with joy upon hearing Claremont's words, as if he believed the boss would fulfill his promise. Thank you, Mr. Claremont. I know you care about your subordinates. I'm sorry to trouble you at this time," Nathan said excitedly, showering Claremont with compliments. With Claremont's words, he could at least provide an explanation to his colleagues. Okay, thank me when I have specific news," Claremont responded with a fake smile, then glanced out the window. "It's getting late now. Go back and rest early. You have to get up early for work tomorrow. Say hello to the injured team members for me." Claremont went to the wine cabinet and took out an unopened bottle of colorful brandy. "Take this bottle back and share it with your team members. This is a fine product from the Dino Magic Winery, not available to ordinary people." Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm very sorry for taking up your time," Nathan said, taking the wine shyly and backing towards the door, still expressing his gratitude. "By the way, call Gale to come up when you get downstairs," Claremont added, watching Nathan leave with a gentle expression, as if he were a close junior. But as soon as Nathan left the room, Claremont's face turned indifferent, even showing a hint of gloom. Before long, Miss Gale, the gatekeeper on the first floor, entered the office without knocking, indicating her trusted status with Claremont. "Your Excellency, did you call me?" Gale asked softly. Claremont's mood was visibly sour. Gale noticed and asked, "What's the matter? Did Nathan bring you bad news? I remember he usually performs well." "Humph, it's not Nathan, it's that idiot Matthew." Claremont raised his glass to take a sip, but then slammed it down in frustration. "Matthew, your nephew, what did he do to make you so angry?" Gale calmly took out a handkerchief and wiped the wine that had spilled on the table. "That idiot is a blabbermouth, casually revealing everything about the tactical vest," Claremont snapped, snatching Gale's handkerchief to wipe the wine stains off his hands. "So that's it. Nathan came here on behalf of the maintenance team members. It makes sense. They had an accident dealing with a fire dragon this morning, and several members were injured," Gale said, quickly piecing together the situation. She then teased, "I told you before, don't let Matthew join the patrol team. They know too many secrets." Claremont couldn't help but give Gale a blank look. The reason he assigned Matthew to the patrol team was that it was supposed to be safer. Could he really send him to the maintenance team? If Matthew got hurt by those magical animals, Claremont would never hear the end of it from Matthew and his mother. But even Claremont had to admit that he instinctively believed the patrol team was safer than the maintenance team. No wonder the maintenance team had strong opinions. "How are you going to handle this? The news about the tactical vest has probably spread through the maintenance team. Do you need to hold a separate meeting with the team captains?" Gale asked. "And what about Matthew? If he stays in the patrol team, he might spread more gossip. Should we reassign him?" As Claremont's personal secretary, Gale not only knew many secrets, but also had the ability to give quick, effective advice. "No need for a meeting. I reassured Nathan and told him I'd do my best to get some active equipment for them," Claremont replied. "As for Matthew, let's transfer that idiot to an outside patrol. Let him face a dog every day. We'll see if he can find any gossip there. Claremont's irritation was evident as he spoke. End of this chapter. Chapter 487, Core Hub. Are you not afraid that he will be in danger if you let him go to the periphery? Gale covered his mouth and teased with a light smile. Claremont couldn't help but give Gale a blank look. Do you really think patrolling outside is dangerous? Those patrol jobs are almost like hanging out. Gale chuckled at Claremont's reaction, but then turned serious. But you really promised them new protective equipment. Is that wise? Even the club can't get much of those tactical vests, and you have to compete with the other two bases. Ours might be the largest, but there's no way to get them in the short term. I know, Claremont said, stroking his goatee. But the risks the maintenance team faces every day are real. The creatures have grown in size, and the pressure on the maintainers has increased. If we don't find ways to strengthen their protection, the probability of accidents will rise. When more incidents occur, the conflict between the maintenance team and the patrol team will intensify. You're thinking ahead, but we don't have the resources, Gale shrugged helplessly. Those tactical vests can't be bought even if you have the money. How do you plan to get the equipment? Claremont smiled mysteriously and handed Gale a piece of ornate letterhead. Gale took it and read the contents curiously. Anduin Wilson? Is this the founder of Silver Flash Trading Company? He wants to meet you? Gale's eyes widened in surprise. This big shot actually came to Germany in person? Claremont's smile widened. You may not know this since you've been staying in the park, but Mr. Wilson sent me an invitation today. He came to Germany to find a stable dealer. I checked, and it's true. The distributors he signed in Egypt had only a short-term cooperation of 1 year. Now, he needs a long-term and stable partner. The other party has been in Germany for several days and has even met with a local business leader. Oh, what do you mean? Gale asked, starting to understand Claremont's thoughts. That's right, Claremont said, his eyes gleaming with determination. Since we can't get equipment from the club, let's find another way. If we can secure a deal with Silver Flash Trading Company, we might be able to get the protective gear we need. Gale nodded slowly, seeing the potential in Claremont's plan. It's a long shot, but it might just work. Let's prepare for the meeting and see if we can convince Mr. Wilson to partner with us. With renewed hope, Claremont and Gale began to strategize, knowing that this meeting could change everything for their team. Mr. Wilson, if the Magic Item Company under my name can secure the agency rights for Silver Flash Trading Company, we might be able to obtain their tactical vests, Claremont said, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Even if such equipment is prohibited from private sales, acquiring more protective amulets could make them standard issue in the park. Although replacing the core each time is a bit troublesome, at least the maintenance team can handle it. This is indeed a good opportunity, but are you sure you can win the agency rights for Silver Flash Trading Company? There must be many merchants vying for that spot. Even though I spend most of my time in the park, I know how popular Silver Flash's products are, Gale remarked, casting a skeptical glance at Claremont. Why are you always so pessimistic? Claremont sighed, shaking his head. My secretary is excellent in many ways, but he does have a knack for dampening spirits. Financially speaking, there are only 3 or 4 merchants in Germany who can compete with me. We can disregard East German merchants because, as Mr. Wilson should know, the products represented in East and West Germany are different. That's likely why he's so eager to find a new agent. If we focus solely on West Germany, there are only 1 or 2 competitors to consider. Fortunately, I have a good relationship with one of them and can negotiate privately. At worst, I might have to concede some benefits. By being willing to invest, I'm confident I can secure the agency rights, Claremont declared with conviction. That makes sense, Gale conceded, a hint of amusement in his voice. Then I wish you success in advance. Thank you. I'll need you to handle the park's operations for the next couple of days. I must concentrate on securing the agency rights for Silver Flash Trading Company. I'll leave after inspecting the core hub and might not return tomorrow, Claremont informed Gale with a smile. Understood. I'll take my leave now. Gale nodded and exited the room. Claremont quickly tidied up and left the office. Outside, Shaltir, who had been eavesdropping, realized that Anduin had invited Claremont. This meant that her master was also making moves and wasn't deterred by the significant events at the breeding base. It seemed they were determined to dismantle the park. This realization brought Shaltir some relief. Lurking around indefinitely was not an option, and she couldn't bear the thought of living as a bat forever. Claremont walked straight towards the center of the base, with Shaltir following closely. Along the way, park employees, both wizards and muggles, greeted Claremont politely, and he responded warmly. It was clear that he was well liked by everyone at the base. Upon reaching the central steeple, Claremont entered directly. Shaltir surmised that the core hub he mentioned must be inside. However, the area around the steeple was quite open, making it difficult for her to follow unnoticed. What concerned Shaltir more was that Claremont hadn't emerged after 2 hours. She waited opposite the steeple, growing increasingly curious. It seems there's a way to leave the base directly from the core hub. Could it be a separate flue network or an area where one can apparate? Shaltir wondered, intrigued by the secrets the minaret might hold. Meanwhile, Anduin, who had been busy elsewhere, returned to Hog's side. "How is it? Have you gathered all the information about this base?" Anduin inquired. Anduin looked down at the busy Hog. "Hey, although we can't guarantee 100% accuracy due to the vast scope of this base and the limited number of surveillance cameras, we've managed to get a general understanding of the situation," Hog said confidently, handing a piece of parchment to Anduin. As a veteran in monitoring, Hog had once managed to keep track of hundreds of Slytherin students at Hogwarts, remembering all their names clearly. Now, he was just in a different location, with the only challenge being the slightly fewer monitoring points. When Anduin saw the record sheet Hog handed over, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. He hadn't expected there to be so many people in this breeding base. The wizards here could be roughly divided into 4 categories based on their functions: the patrol team, the maintenance team, the medical team, and the handyman. The patrol team was responsible for the security of the park. There were 36 members in total, with 16 handling the night shift and 20 the daytime. They were divided into internal and external patrols. 6 members patrolled outside at night, while 10 did so during the day. The internal patrols consisted of 10 people, regardless of the shift, divided into 5 teams of 2. This arrangement was logical, as those patrolling outside were more likely to encounter muggles exploring or camping, especially during the day. The maintenance team consisted of wizards responsible for the internal operations of the park, mainly focusing on the escort, placement, and control of dangerous creatures. They had a total of 35 members, divided into 7 teams of 5, each led by a captain. The medical team comprised wizards who cared for the magical animals. This group included scholars proficient in magical zoology and ordinary healing wizards, with their numbers ranging from 25 to 30. Due to the fluctuating number of medical personnel, Hog's records were not entirely clear. Anduin took a moment to absorb all this information, appreciating the thoroughness of Hog's work. The organization and structure of the base were now much clearer to him. Chapter 488, The Old Fox Confronts the Little Fox. As for the remaining people, Hog realized that they did not have a unified job title, so he collectively called them handymen. In fact, there were all kinds of people among them, wizards and muggles alike. Their jobs were indeed varied. Some cooked, some prepared meals for magical animals, and some cleaned up. Most of them were actually part of the maintenance and medical teams, working hand in hand. Anduin was secretly startled when he saw the number of these so-called handymen. There are 113 handymen in this base? Wouldn't it be more than 200, including the rest of the wizards? Anduin looked at Hog with some surprise. "That's right, my lord. This is still an incomplete statistic. After all, some people did not appear in front of the surveillance cameras. Only about 20 of them are wizards. The rest are all muggles. Many of them are family members of those wizards, and their jobs are very unstable. They basically go wherever they are needed." Hog shrugged helplessly. "I didn't expect this golden snidget to be quite dark." Once Anduin saw the number of people, he understood the plan of the silver spear in his heart. It was clear that they were using this large number of Muggles as hostages. However, this alone was not enough to make Anduin wary. He had expected a large number of people in the breeding base, but he didn't expect there to be so many, and the proportion of Muggles was surprisingly high. This was obviously a situation that the Silver Spear had orchestrated intentionally, as it did not require so many people to operate a breeding base of the current size. After thinking it over, Anduin sorted out the connections in his mind, but didn't dwell on it too much. He looked at Hogg again. Anything else? Yes, Shaltair tracked down Claremont just now. He is indeed the behind-the-scenes manager of this base. This is their conversation and briefing. Now Claremont has entered the place he called the core hub and has not appeared for a long time. After Hogg's simple and quick report, he handed over another stack of parchment. After taking it, Anduin took a closer look and then chuckled. Very good. Shaltair did a great job. She has made a significant contribution. Oh, is there anything we can use here? Hogg asked curiously. This information is extremely valuable. From Claremont's conversation, we can summarize the following points. First, except for Claremont and his assistant Gale, only members of the patrol team are truly trustworthy in this breeding base. The rest, whether they are wizards or Muggles, believe that what they are doing is legitimate work. These people may come in handy in the future. Secondly, Claremont wants to obtain West Germany's product agency rights from us, and he has revealed his bottom line. We may use this to get closer to Claremont and let him be our helper. Third, the core hub has a passage to the outside world, and Claremont is the manager. The key to breaking the barrier is there. Anduin explained to Hogg simply and directly. The information Shaltair had detected today was truly crucial, and with this information, his actions could be accelerated significantly. Let Claremont be our helper? He is not with us. How could he help us? Are you planning to use the Imperious Curse to control him? Hogg looked at Anduin in confusion. No, using the Imperious Curse on someone with the Silver Spear will easily expose the target. The club has ways to protect the mind. When I say let him be a helper, I mean let him be used by us without knowing it. After Anduin chuckled, his gaze shifted to the monitor screen. Which one is Claremont's office? Let me see. Let him be used by us unconsciously? Hogg was a little confused, but he immediately obeyed and pointed out the picture of Claremont's office for Anduin. After Anduin observed the whole picture carefully, a smile gradually appeared on his face. There are 3 griffin ornaments. In his office, it seemed that he had a particular fondness for this kind of creature. Huh? Hogg looked at Anduin in confusion, not understanding why the Lord was suddenly interested in the other's hobbies. Anduin didn't elaborate. He simply instructed Hogg to continue monitoring and then returned to his alchemy laboratory. The next day, Anduin, dressed in formal attire, appeared in front of the Claremont Magic Supply Store in the West German area of Dudden House. He had received an invitation from Claremont early that morning. Although Anduin had been aware of Claremont's plans for some time, he hadn't expected such eagerness from the other party. As soon as he entered the shop, a formally dressed witch greeted him with a professional smile. You must be Mr. Wilson. Your Excellency Claremont has been expecting you. Please follow me, the young witch said politely. The staff had been instructed by their boss to ensure that today's distinguished guest was well entertained. Anduin nodded with a smile and took the opportunity to observe Claremont's shop. It was evident that Claremont was quite influential. The magic supply shop occupied a large area and had 2 floors, both luxuriously decorated. However, most of the products sold were imported props rather than self-developed alchemy items. As they ascended to the 2nd floor and entered the inner office, Anduin saw Claremont standing at the main entrance, dressed formally and smiling warmly. Welcome, Mr. Wilson. I didn't expect you to come to Germany in person. I'm truly honored, Claremont greeted enthusiastically, shaking Anduin's hand with genuine excitement. Thank you, Mr. Claremont. Please call me Anduin. I'm just a young man, after all. I didn't expect you to greet me personally. I'm the one who should be flattered, Anduin replied, noticing the exquisite snacks and fresh bouquets in the office, indicating Claremont's attention to detail in hospitality. Haha, Anduin. As the youngest recipient of the International Alchemy Conference Pioneering Contribution Gold Award, your name has spread throughout the wizarding circles of Europe this year. How could I not give you a warm welcome? Come in, I've prepared some tea for you. Please, have a taste, Claremont said, his demeanor that of a seasoned diplomat. If Anduin hadn't known Claremont's true nature, he might have been deceived by his charming facade. Claremont led Anduin to a seat on the sofa, then waved away the staff outside the door with a smile. He enthusiastically poured a cup of fragrant coffee for Anduin himself. Try this coffee. These are first-class coffee beans cultivated by Roman wizards using their unique magic. I guarantee you won't be disappointed, Claremont said politely. Thank you, Lord Claremont, Anduin replied, taking the cup of coffee with a slight nod and a smile. I apologize for the sudden visit and for taking up your valuable time. Nonsense. As the person in charge of Silver Flash Trading Company, your visit to Germany is an honor for us. We should be the ones treating you well, Claremont said, smiling warmly, as if they were old friends rather than mere acquaintances. I would like to thank you for your hospitality, Anduin said politely, before adopting a more serious tone. I am honored to visit your magic supplies store today. I did not expect your business to be so extensive. I even see the latest magic camera of the season from Egypt here. Haha, you truly are a professional. I didn't expect you to recognize it at a glance, Claremont replied, looking at Anduin with a surprised expression. It's also a coincidence, Anduin chuckled. The latest magic camera of this season was designed by our firm with the help of Miss Abdu. It belongs to the same series as our latest magic lamp and phonograph, and they are released as a joint product. This series also includes several items from other alchemy companies in Egypt. However, I haven't seen those here. Are they selling too well, or are they not suitable for your market? Claremont's smile became a bit strained at Anduin's words, and he cursed inwardly. This little fox is deliberately trying to undermine me. But Claremont was also secretly impressed by Anduin's subtle power. It seems this kid is no amateur when it comes to business collaborations. Despite his inner turmoil, Claremont maintained a broad smile. We can't compare to you. We are fortunate to introduce a few new products. Maybe in the future, we will rely on you to help us obtain more sales permits from Egypt. Otherwise, we might be out of luck. Anduin's smile remained, but his eyebrows raised slightly. This guy is truly an old fox, so adaptable and cunning. Is he trying to outmaneuver me by retreating to advance? Does he still intend to challenge me? End of this chapter. Chapter 489, The Lion's Grand Opening. You're flattering me, Anduin said modestly, raising the coffee cup in his hand. With your strength, this is just a piece of cake. Perhaps we will have a chance to cooperate in the future. There are still many things I need to ask for your help with. Oh, cooperation? What do you mean? Claremont knew the main event was coming, but he still put on a curious expression. Yes, I came to Germany this time for the purpose of cooperation, Anduin explained, a puzzled expression crossing his face. And I think the progress of our cooperation needs to be accelerated because I found something confusing. Really, if you need my help, please feel free to ask. Although I am just a small person, I still know a lot about Sid, Claremont said, smiling as he refilled Anduin's coffee cup. West Germany. This is what confuses me, Anduin repeated. I found that in Germany, East Germany and West Germany are almost completely divided into two worlds. Even here in Dudenlu, it's the same. This is indeed a special situation for us. The relationship between us West Germans and East Germany is not harmonious. There are some historical reasons for this. It seems that you are also very interested in politics? Claremont nodded slightly. I don't really care about politics, but business has brought me a lot of trouble, Anduin said, putting down his cup and adopting a serious expression. You should have seen it too. When I was in Egypt, I negotiated cooperation with 2 German merchants. But who would have thought that these 2 merchants actually belonged to different, regions? Anduin paused. One of them is in East Germany, responsible for selling our civilian products, and the other is in West Germany, in charge of selling alchemy equipment. However, the 2 series of products from our Silver Flash Trading Company cannot be fully circulated in the 2 regions. East Germans cannot buy our alchemy amulets, and West Germans cannot see those magic lamps. This is equivalent to losing half of the local market. Anduin shook his head with a distressed expression, as if a large piece of galleon was waving to him in front of him. I have indeed heard of the situation you mentioned. Claremont nodded slightly, then joked, It is said that this has made a lot of money for the local black market. To make a fortune, it is obviously in the same country, yet it turns out to be like smuggling. Who says otherwise? Isn't this equivalent to losing a lot of business for me? Anduin shook his head helplessly, then looked up at Claremont. As an elite in Germany, what do you think of the division between East and West Germany, and when will the situation here be eased? What kind of elite am I? Claremont shook his head modestly at first, then said sincerely, I'm not optimistic about the relationship between East and West Germany. I think the possibility of continued division is much greater than that of reunification. Oh, then how big do you think the possibility of unification is? Anduin asked curiously, knowing that Claremont was the leader of a leading splinter organization. He didn't want to reveal too much about himself. If you want my opinion. Claremont pretended to think for a while. I think there is a high probability that Germany will continue the process of splitting. In a few years, it might not even be a single country anymore. The Ministry of Magic might also be split in two. It seems you are not optimistic about the reunification of Germany. The other people I visited these days share the same opinion. Anduin frowned slightly. If this is the case, then the Silver Flash Trading Company will need to change its strategy in Germany. You don't know. Anduin said with some melancholy. I came to Germany this time, mainly to find a product dealer who can cooperate with us. Anduin had been with me for a long time. My original cooperation with the two merchants was only supposed to last for 1 year. However, given the current situation in Germany, perhaps one dealer cannot satisfy the market. There must be a merchant on both sides of East and West Germany that can cooperate. The real trouble now is that goods on both sides of East and West Germany cannot be exchanged with each other, Anduin said with a troubled expression. Before I can talk about long-term distributors, I need to speak with 2 temporary agents on both sides first. East Germany needs to sell alchemy equipment, while West Germany can sell civilian items. This is much more complicated than I originally imagined. Claremont nodded silently, understanding Anduin's predicament. He then replied with a smile, Oh, Anduin, this isn't as troublesome as it seems. You just need to turn these 2 collaborations into one. Oh? What do you mean? Anduin asked, playing along. You just need to select a long-term distributor in both East and West Germany and let them sell the products that are lacking in their respective areas. Once the short-term contracts are over, you can fill in the product categories for them, Claremont explained. He suspected that Anduin had already thought of this and was merely waiting for him to propose it. Your idea can indeed save me a lot of time, Anduin nodded, then got straight to the point. I wonder if Lord Claremont is interested in the business of Silver Flash Trading Company? Naturally, Claremont said without hesitation. If you are willing to cooperate with my firm, we can join forces, and I will assist you in developing the local market. A strong alliance? Anduin mused. But there are many powerful merchants in Germany. I have no reason to choose you over them. Perhaps I should call a few more merchant owners to host a bid and see everyone's sincerity. Mr. Wilson, Claremont said seriously, with all due respect, there are not many merchants in West Germany who can handle your business. My firm has the highest market share in the local alchemy industry. You will not be disappointed if you choose to cooperate with us. Oh, really? Anduin responded, showing a pensive expression. Claremont couldn't help but curse inwardly. This kid really doesn't see rabbits and doesn't scatter eagles. Doesn't he want me to tell him the truth? Mr. Wilson, perhaps you can listen to my quotation. If you find it suitable, there will be no need to discuss it with other firms and waste your time, Claremont suggested, knowing it was time to bargain. He hoped Anduin's demands wouldn't be too high. Okay, Anduin replied calmly. In that case, let me see your sincerity, Lord Claremont. Mr. Wilson, Claremont Magic Supplies Store is willing to pay you a one-time agency fee of 1,000 galleons for an order worth 3,000 galleons. We will also pay a 20% deposit up front and guarantee that in the next 3 years, we will import goods worth at least 2,000 galleons annually from Silver Flash Trading Company, Claremont said with a sincere expression. The conditions he offered were quite generous, securing orders for the next 3 years. After all, who knows whether there will be a market for Silver Flash's products in 2 years, or if they will be impacted by other similar products on the market. When the pirated version comes out, if it is still cheaper than Anduin's product, his order may lose money. Anduin couldn't help but nod secretly when he heard Claremont's conditions. This old guy is quite arrogant, but since I'm here to trick you this time, how can I not make you bleed? Your quotation is indeed quite sincere, Anduin nodded with a smile, but immediately changed the subject. However, even if Germany is such a big market, an order of just 3,000 galleons will be easily digested, not to mention the 2,000 galleons a year in the future and a one-time agency fee. Claremont frowned when he heard this, secretly cursing Anduin for being greedy, but he still asked with a smile, "Then what do you suggest?" "Hey!" Anduin chuckled. "Your Excellency Claremont, you must know that the products of our Silver Flash firm have passed the test of the Egyptian market. Even the alchemists in Egypt are full of praise, and they couldn't replicate my work in a short time." After laying the groundwork, Anduin began to speak more boldly. First of all, a 3-year guaranteed order is too short, and the price is not reasonable. I suggest at least a 5-year long-term contract. In the first year, the order must be at least 5,000 galleons, and every year after that, an order of 5,000 galleons must be guaranteed for 5 consecutive years. The one-time payment of the agency fee is also not reasonable. I will not change your first payment. 1,000 galleons is fine, but we still need an annual agency fee of 500 galleons. This is the most basic sincerity. When Claremont heard this, his expression could no longer remain calm and composed. His eyes widened in shock. He didn't expect Anduin to be so ruthless. This was practically daylight robbery. But before he could raise any objections, Anduin continued. "At the same time, I am a little worried about whether your business situation as a dealer is really as good as it seems. To cooperate with us, you need to prepare 5,000 galleons in cash as a reserve, deposited in the Silver Flash Commercial Bank as a guarantee in case your side fails to deliver the final payment." End of this chapter. Chapter 490, The Guardian Badge. After listening to Anduin's conditions, Claremont's face darkened immediately. He didn't just want to scold his mother. He wanted to pull out his wand and cast Avada Kedavra on this little bastard right then and there. It was unreasonable. Claremont was so angry that his brain ached. If he agreed to Anduin's conditions, wouldn't that mean he would have to give the other party 6,000 galleons in cash before even starting the cooperation? Who in their right mind could do this? Among the conditions, the annual agency fee was actually manageable, but the most troublesome part was the 5,000 galleons in cash. The other party euphemistically called it a reserve. After handing over the money, Anduin would keep it for 5 years, and after that period, he might earn another 5 galleons with it. If Anduin found another excuse to charge Claremont's store with a crime, he might never see the money again in his life. Impossible! Claremont didn't bother to put on a show at this moment, and looked at Anduin with an ugly expression. "Your request is really too harsh. Please forgive me for not being able to agree." "Oh, then there's no way." Anduin shrugged helplessly. "If that's the case, then you can come back when I bid for the contract. I believe everyone can negotiate a better price by then. I thought it would be a piece of cake to undertake such a condition with your strength." After finishing speaking, Anduin got up, patted his pants, and looked at Claremont apologetically. "Sorry, please forgive me, Mr. Claremont. Thank you for your hospitality. I have also invited the famous German wand maker, Mr. Gregorovich. He seems interested in developing the alchemy business. Maybe he can agree to my terms." When Claremont saw that Anduin was so decisive that he didn't even discuss it further and was about to leave immediately, he panicked. And when he heard the mention of Gregorovich's name, his heart tightened even more. This Gregorovitch was not the one who was robbed of the Elder Wand by Grindelwald back then, but his child. He had inherited the wand-making skills of his parents and was the most powerful wand-maker in Germany, running the family Gregorovitch wand shop. Claremont hadn't heard that the owner of this legendary wand shop had the idea of expanding his business, but seeing Anduin's calm demeanor, he felt it was probably true. If the opponent was Gregorovitch, he might really be able to bear such harsh conditions. Moreover, Gregorovitch had a good relationship with the famous British wand-maker Ollivander, and Anduin might use this relationship to his advantage. Claremont thought a lot in the blink of an eye, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt it was really possible. He became increasingly anxious. "Wait, Mr. Wilson." Before Anduin could take 2 steps, Claremont quickly stopped him. "Maybe we can discuss this cooperation again. Don't leave in such a hurry." Claremont even stood up and embraced Anduin himself. This was a very inappropriate move in business negotiations because it exposed the urgency and bottom line of the negotiator. "Oh, Your Excellency Claremont is ready to agree?" Anduin looked at him with great interest. "How can a mere few thousand galleons be a problem for you?" Claremont was a little embarrassed, but still pulled Anduin back to his seat. "Mr. Wilson, can we have a little more flexibility with this price, especially in terms of the reserve funds? It's really a bit too high. I don't think anyone can spend so much money at once." "Sorry, Mr. Claremont. Everything else is negotiable except the agency fee and reserve fund." Anduin shook his head indifferently. Orders and fees. He just wanted to get some cash from Claremont before dealing with the other party. Did Claremont really think that Anduin would agree to an agency contract with him? After hearing Anduin's resolute answer, Claremont frowned worriedly. Could he afford the sum of 6,000 galleons? If he insisted on paying, it would mean taking out all the working capital from his shop and the black market, and he would also have to dip into the funds at the breeding base. This would be equivalent to embezzling the club's public funds. No matter how daring Claremont was, he wouldn't risk that. However, he was very eager for the equipment in Anduin's possession, so he immediately found himself in a dilemma. Maybe I could talk to the adults at the club and ask them to advance some of the funds as trade costs? Claremont thought. But there must be conditions that the club's leaders would agree to, such as those high-quality alchemy equipment. After quickly calculating in his mind, Claremont felt that if conditions permitted, the Silver Spear should be able to give him some support. However, there were some things he needed to confirm with Anduin. "Mr. Wilson," Claremont began after preparing his words, "it's not impossible for me to agree to such a condition, but you also have to agree to one condition. Please tell me. As long as it's a reasonable request, I don't mind accommodating you." Anduin replied, spreading his hands generously. "That's right. I know that besides the current alchemy props you are selling, you also have some more powerful equipment for sale. I hope that these items will also be included in this transaction," Claremont said, revealing his true intentions. If he could secure the agency rights for those high-level products, he could use them to negotiate with the club's leaders. The club still needed these items very much. Although the club's leaders had ways to buy this equipment, the price offered by the British Ministry of Magic was too high, raising suspicions. If he could get these items at a reasonable price, he could continuously supply them to the club in exchange for funds. As a result, those annual guaranteed order fees would be nothing to him. "You mean those high-level equipment?" Anduin sneered internally, recognizing Claremont's true intentions. However, he shook his head lightly. "Sorry, these alchemy items are too dangerous to sell directly to the public. We have handed over their operating rights to the British Ministry of Magic, and it is illegal to sell them without authorization." "Can't you be more flexible?" Claremont lowered his voice. "If you can give me a message, I can add a part of the reserve, and other conditions are also negotiable." Anduin looked at Claremont teasingly. Was he trying to bribe him? Did he think Anduin was the kind of person who lacked money? "I'm sorry, Your Excellency Claremont, but you can't joke about these items. I don't want to offend the Ministry of Magic of my country," Anduin replied firmly. "Then can't you think of other ways? For example, disguising individual equipment as lower-level props that can be sold normally, or we could handle it privately without public accounts. Claremont was desperate, trying every trick he could think of. Not take the public account? Is he trying to fool me into smuggling directly from the source? Anduin thought, looking at Claremont speechlessly. This guy had clearly been influenced by his association with smugglers like the Silver Spear. How could he suggest such a terrible idea, essentially dragging him into the abyss of crime? Your Excellency Claremont, please don't make jokes, Anduin said seriously, refusing the dangerous request. Seeing Anduin's reluctance, Claremont was immediately frustrated. If that's the case, I'm afraid I can't agree to your previous conditions, Claremont said, shaking his head. If we can't get those high-end pieces of equipment and only import other items, who knows how long it will take to earn back the 6,000 galleons. It seems that Your Excellency Claremont has a special liking for powerful equipment, Anduin remarked with a light smile. He then shifted the conversation. I really can't sell those XX-level items at will, but perhaps I have other ways to meet your needs. Oh, what do you mean? Claremont's interest was piqued. I'm preparing to launch a batch of new products soon, Anduin began, pausing for effect. The strength of these new alchemy props is much higher than our old products, but they haven't reached the dangerous level of sex. New products? Claremont echoed, surprised. He hadn't expected Anduin to be referring to something other than high-end equipment. Is there anything special about these new products? He asked patiently. Allow me to introduce one of them to you, Anduin said, producing a beautifully decorated small box. When he opened it, Claremont saw a metal badge engraved with a griffin inside. The badge was slightly larger than the talisman items he was used to seeing, and it was clear from its appearance that expensive materials had been used. Please allow me to grandly introduce this, Anduin began. This is my new Guardian badge, an enhanced version of the defense talisman. When in danger, it can directly cast the human iron armor curse to protect the wearer. The manifested protective spell can withstand attacks with a cumulative power of 300 points. To give you an idea, this is roughly equivalent to 7 stun spells cast by an adult wizard, Anduin explained. Additionally, this badge has the function of storing energy. After being activated, as long as the wizard injects magic power into it, it can be used repeatedly, accepting roughly 35 to 40 recharges. Anduin pushed the box towards Claremont, detailing the features of the badge. End of this chapter. Chapter 491. The Greedy Anduin. Guardian Badge? Claremont immediately took out the badge upon hearing Anduin's words and began to examine it closely. To be honest, he was already quite excited about this badge. It could automatically cast the human iron armor curse and could be recharged repeatedly, which perfectly met the needs of the maintenance team members at the base. Moreover, the griffin engraved on it was so lifelike that Claremont found himself quite taken with it, unable to put it down. However, Claremont was still a bit worried about whether such a badge alone could win the support of the higher-ups in the club. This uncertainty made him hesitant to make a decision. Mr. Wilson, Claremont held the badge and looked at Anduin. Can you let me test the effect of this badge? Of course, that's no problem, Anduin replied with a smile. He then pulled out his wand from his robes and looked at Claremont. You don't mind, do you? No problem at all. Understanding what Anduin intended to do, Claremont nodded immediately, then put the badge on and stood in the open space nearby. Quickly knock back. After ensuring Claremont was ready, Anduin raised his wand and cast a knockback curse. The spell projectile hit Claremont forcefully, but the badge on his chest flashed with a burst of light. Immediately, a wave of magic formed a sturdy humanoid armor that blocked the spell. After experiencing it firsthand, Claremont was immediately impressed with the Guardian badge. The protective strength of the humanoid iron armor curse was very high, and it activated automatically upon sensing danger. The activation speed was also remarkable. Even though Anduin's spell was cast quickly, the badge's reaction was faster. Mr. Claremont, you can try injecting magic power into the badge now. I will show you its resistance to elemental spells once it is recharged, Anduin suggested, smiling as he watched Claremont continuously rub the badge on his chest. Okay, no problem. Anduin's proposal was exactly what Claremont wanted. The most troublesome magical creatures in the park were the fire dragons, whose dragon flames often burned the staff. After a moment, Claremont signaled to Anduin that he had fully charged the badge. Anduin nodded slightly and then reminded him, "I will continue to cast spells next. Please don't move around, or you might accidentally burn your office down." "Understood. Burning flames." Anduin raised his wand, and a fine flame spewed out like a tongue of fire from a flamethrower. It forcibly hit the humanoid iron armor curse and continued to burn for about 5 seconds before stopping. "How is it? Are you satisfied with the performance of the Guardian badge?" Anduin asked with a smile after finishing the spell. "Very satisfied. I could hardly feel the temperature of those flames. Does the humanoid iron armor curse on it also have a heat insulation function?" Claremont was initially nervous when facing the flames, but after being burned for a while, he found that the magic armor was very strong. The effect was even better than that of ordinary humanoid iron armor spells, and he didn't feel any temperature rise at all. "That's right," Anduin nodded. "This is an improved and strengthened humanoid iron armor curse, which I developed together with Professor Flitwick of Charms when I was at Hogwarts. It is included in XXX level equipment. This optimized spell is also used on my tactical vest, and I have to pay Professor Flitwick a patent fee every time I sell one. So the price of products with this spell will not be very low. You have to be mentally prepared." Anduin wasn't lying. Many of the spells on his products had been improved and optimized, with significant contributions from Professor Flitwick and Professor Burns. For example, the self-check pocket watch he made before and the magic power meter that had not yet been released were all products of such collaborations, jointly created by him and Professor Flitwick. Anduin had a weak point. He had originally promised Professor Flitwick that when researching this type of magic, he would do so under Flitwick's supervision. It can be said that much of Anduin's early spell research was completed under Flitwick's guidance. When Anduin sells related products, he also reserves a share for Professor Flitwick and Professor Burns, which can be considered a patent fee or technical dividend. "I see," Claremont nodded knowingly, feeling a bit emotional. The young man in front of him was truly remarkable. At such a young age, he was already studying optimization spells with the school's professors. Scholars of good repute called him the strongest alchemist of the new generation. "So, what do you think? Are you satisfied with this new product? In the next year or two, I will launch a series of new alchemy items, and I guarantee that all overseas dealers can purchase the corresponding products for sale. With these, the agency fees and reserves of a few thousand galleons are just a drop in the bucket," Anduin said as if discussing business. "It's really surprisingly effective." Even if Claremont wanted to be critical, he couldn't do so in good conscience. However, he still asked, "When do you plan to launch such a product? And can you guarantee the quality and output?" "You don't have to worry about that," Anduin replied confidently. "If you need a Guardian badge, it will be available in a month or two, and the effect of each one will be just as good as the current one. If you prefer a specific shape or specifications, you can also customize it." "So can you make a decision now?" Anduin asked Claremont again. Well, to be honest, Claremont was genuinely interested. If he had enough liquidity, he might agree on the spot. However, he didn't have the financial resources at the moment and needed to consult with his club. "Sorry, although I am eager to sign a contract with you now, I can't pay such a large sum of money all at once. Can you allow me some time to think about it?" Claremont said sincerely. This time, he was indeed speaking from the heart. "Do you still need to think about it? To be honest, this makes me doubt whether you are truly sincere about cooperating," Anduin said, looking at Claremont with some dissatisfaction. No, I really want to finalize the contract with you right now, but I need to discuss it with my partner. You know, this is a big deal, and it will take some time for us to raise the money." Claremont emphasized, "Please give me a little more time. I hope you won't confirm the contract with others during this period. I am willing to pay you a deposit first. How about 1,000 galleons? Anduin laughed inwardly. Discuss with his partner? Perhaps he was going to seek approval from Silver Spear, but that didn't matter to Anduin. However, he still pretended to be a shrewd businessman and said, "For a deposit of 2,000 galleons, I can give you half a month to think it over exclusively. If you decide to cooperate within this time, the money will be counted as part of the reserve. If you choose not to cooperate, I can refund half of the deposit. But if I do not receive a reply after the period, the deposit will not be refunded." Claremont's expression turned sour again. He couldn't understand how this kid in front of him could be so greedy for money, as if he had fallen into a pit of gold. But Claremont didn't want to miss this golden opportunity. He made a rough calculation and thought that with this Guardian badge, he had a good chance of convincing the club's members. And if it didn't work out, at worst, he would lose face, but he should be able to gather the money by asking around. Claremont considered his options. If he couldn't gather the funds from those around him, he would have to resort to seeking a loan from the goblins at Gringotts. Determined, he gritted his teeth and nodded firmly. "All right, Mr. Wilson, I agree to your request. But can you leave this Guardian badge with me for now? I need it to convince my partners." "Of course, Mr. Claremont. This badge is a gift for you. It's not a problem at all," Anduin replied, with a slight smile. The badge had been intended for Claremont from the start, and Anduin had planned to give it to him regardless. "Thank you very much," Claremont said, unable to hide his admiration for the badge. Not only was it powerful, but it also featured his favorite griffin engraved on it. "Please wait a moment while I gather the money." Claremont then went to the safe in front of his desk, rummaging through it for a while. He poured a large leather bag from his space bag and collected all the money from the cash register on the first floor of the store. After a considerable effort, he managed to gather the 2,000 galleons, even borrowing some from his employees, which left him feeling quite embarrassed. Nonetheless, he had managed to scrape together the deposit, though it included a lot of silver sickles and copper nuts. Anduin didn't mind the mixed currency. He meticulously counted the money, ensuring there were no discrepancies. This also helped reinforce his money-conscious persona. "No problem. The amount is correct," Anduin said, placing all the coins into a large leather bag with a smile. "By the way, I found an extra 2 sickles and 9 nuts here. Mr. Claremont, please take it." Claremont looked at the small change in his hand and then glanced at Anduin with a hint of resentment. He had sacrificed a lot today, and all he had received in return was a promise. End of this chapter. Chapter 492, The Dark Room. "By the way, Your Excellency Claremont." Anduin quickly shifted the conversation, not paying attention to Claremont's expression. "Do you know Minister Pete of the German Ministry of Magic?" Hearing Anduin mention Pete, Claremont's heart skipped a beat. "Ah, I don't know our German Minister of Magic personally, but why did you suddenly bring him up?" Noticing Claremont's reaction, Anduin realized that the other party was not familiar with Minister Pete's identity, which only piqued his curiosity further. Why was Claremont so indifferent to his identity? Pete gave Anduin a very peculiar feeling, quite different from other Silver Spears, who preferred to hide in dark corners. Pete was unusually bold. Maintaining a calm demeanor, Anduin replied, "I sent him a greeting post after arriving in Germany, but the minister seems to be very busy, and I haven't received a reply yet." "Oh? You want to see our Minister of Magic?" Claremont relaxed upon hearing this. "Is it something important? Maybe I can help. Although I don't know Minister Pete very well, I can certainly talk to him." "It's not particularly urgent. I had the idea of opening a branch in Germany before meeting you, Lord Claremont. I wanted to discuss it with Minister Pete. The German Ministry of Magic has also purchased a lot of alchemy equipment from us, and as a courtesy, I wanted to thank him in person." Anduin fabricated a reason to deflect the conversation. "So that's how it is." Claremont heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Pete hadn't met Anduin in time, or his agency business might have been jeopardized. Returning to his gentle demeanor, Claremont said, "Minister Pete has a good relationship with private businessmen and groups. If I get the chance to meet him soon, I'll mention it to him for you." "That would be great. Those of us who do transnational business must establish good relationships with the Ministry of Magic in each country," Anduin said, standing up slowly. "Thank you, Sir Claremont, for your hospitality. I will take my leave now and hope to hear from you soon. Hey, certainly. Claremont's smile froze as Anduin mentioned this again. Watching Anduin leave, Claremont finally breathed a sigh of relief, realizing his back was drenched in sweat. I didn't expect Anduin to look so young, yet be so cunning. The pressure he exudes is immense. I could hardly breathe. Claremont sighed to himself, sinking heavily onto the sofa in relief. After a moment, he seemed to remember something, and took off the griffin-shaped badge on his chest, playing with it in his palm. If there was anything to be happy about from today's meeting, it was the badge he had received. These items were not only powerful, but also visibly exquisite and luxurious, seemingly made entirely of goblin mithril. It's no wonder Anduin's business is so prosperous. The quality of the alchemy tools produced by Silver Flash Trading Company is impeccable, Claremont mused. I've heard many people try to crack and imitate his products, but they can't match his uniform craftsmanship. All his alchemy products use optimized new spells, making them difficult to replicate. From this perspective, this business deal isn't a loss. In 5 years, it shouldn't be impacted by other similar products. Silver Flash Trading Company is still very strong. Perhaps it will only take 1 to 2 years to recoup the investment. Claremont comforted himself, feeling an inexplicable increase in confidence in Anduin and his Silver Flash firm. Meanwhile, Anduin returned to his residence at Dongdu Denglu. After the negotiation, Anduin immediately sought out Hog. How is it? Is the signal reception still normal? Anduin asked quickly as he entered the monitoring room. It's completely normal, but the old guy is almost glued to the badge you handed him. Look at his face. It's really nauseating after a while, Hog replied, pointing to the screen with a look of disgust. The screen showed Claremont's face filling almost the entire frame, as if he were leaning right in front of the surveillance camera. That's good. Did he reveal any useful information after I left? Anduin asked calmly, though his face showed signs of fatigue. He kept bad-mouthing you at first, but then he started praising you. I think this old man's brain is probably out of order, Hog said with a smirk. Very well. Make sure to record his whereabouts, all his words and deeds, and everything he sees. He seems to like that badge a lot. If nothing goes wrong, he should carry it with him. Call me as soon as possible. I'll be in the laboratory, Anduin instructed. The Guardian badge that Anduin had given to Claremont was actually a cleverly disguised monitoring device, hastily assembled in a day using a surveillance spider and some precious materials. The purpose was to use this badge to make Claremont his eyes and ears. The badge's functions were so intimate that it seemed tailor-made for Claremont. After explaining everything to Hog, Anduin moved to the nearby laboratory. To ensure the success of the raid on the breeding base, he needed to prepare a lot of things, including brewing enough potion to subdue the magical animals. He also needed to prepare various props to handle the legal wizards. Claremont, after receiving the Guardian badge, played with it for a long time, much to Hog's disgust. No one wants to constantly watch an old man fawning over a trinket. But just after nightfall, Claremont put the badge back on and apparated away from Dudden House. Instead of going home or returning to the breeding base, Claremont arrived in a remote suburb of Berlin. This place was not empty like ordinary suburbs. It was an abandoned manor covered by a large area of shielding magic. Inside, it was actually an open-air black market, similar to those in Egypt. Claremont seemed very familiar with this place. After entering the black market, he greeted several guards and quickly passed through the market area. He entered a building at the back and went directly to the second floor, which housed an office with a layout similar to the one in the breeding base. I'd better report the cooperation with Silver Flash Trading Company to the higher-ups as soon as possible. The longer I wait, the more likely Anduin's money-hungry nature might cause him to change his mind. Claremont muttered to himself as he poured a glass of wine from the cabinet and took a sip. With that thought, Claremont put down the wine glass and went to a row of bookshelves behind the desk. He found a very inconspicuous History of Magic book in the third-to-last row of the second bookshelf and gently pulled it. The entire bookshelf slowly moved to the side, revealing a hidden wall behind it. Claremont then drew his wand and tapped the wall a dozen times in a specific pattern. The wall suddenly cracked open, revealing a small, dark room about 7 or 8 square meters in size. The room was empty except for tall floor-to-ceiling mirrors installed on the left, middle, and right walls. Covered with a gorgeous velvet cloth, the room featured a stone platform with a stone basin and an ordinary fireplace. After Claremont entered the dimly lit room, he headed straight to the stone basin directly opposite him. The basin was very clean, containing only a little water. Claremont reached out and grabbed a small handful of white powder from a box next to the stone platform, sprinkling it into the basin. The clear water in the basin began to surge, as if it were boiling. Claremont showed no sign of surprise, standing quietly in front of the stone basin and waiting patiently. After 5 or 6 minutes, the liquid in the basin began to change. The once clear water turned cloudy and then gradually shifted to a deep red. Seeing this, Claremont breathed a sigh of relief, visibly relaxing. Ignoring the stone platform, he turned around and walked to a floor-to-ceiling mirror, removing the flannelette covering it. The mirror's surface was unusual. It did not reflect his image, but was pitch black, like the entrance to a deep cave. Standing before the mirror, Claremont could not see any light, let alone his own reflection. Adopting a respectful posture, Claremont stood silently in front of the mirror, waiting. He didn't have to wait long. Soon, the sound of clear, deliberate footsteps echoed from the depths of the dark mirror. A figure slowly emerged from the darkness, moving closer as if the mirror were a portal to a deep cave. The figure, clad in a silver robe and holding a silver spear, wore a faceless mask. It approached Claremont, looking at him through the mirror. End of this chapter. Chapter 493, Mirror Tunnel. My lord! Claremont bowed his head respectfully and greeted the figure in front of him immediately. What happened? Why did you call me suddenly? The silver spear that had appeared did not waste time with pleasantries, but asked concisely. I'm very sorry, my lord. I have an important situation that needs to be reported to you, so I interrupted you abruptly, Claremont said, understanding the direct nature of the lord before him. He then recounted the information he had discussed with Anduin earlier. Silver Flash Firm. Silver Spear murmured thoughtfully. You mean, why did he sign an agency contract with your magic supply store? That's right. This time, Anduin, the boss of Silver Flash Trading Company, came to Germany in person to establish a long-term trade agreement. I negotiated with him personally. Although he made it clear that he could not sell those XXX-level tactical equipment, the current products and the new products that will be launched in the future are of great value to us, Claremont explained. This Silver Flash firm has been in the limelight recently, Silver Spear noted, then looked at Claremont. But the other side is expanding so aggressively now. Is there any risk? Silver Spear understood Claremont's intentions. He wanted the club to invest. However, facing the sudden rise of Silver Flash firm, Silver Spear thought it was better to be cautious. After all, a large sum of gold galleons was at stake, and if wasted, it could affect the club's development. When Claremont sensed that the Lord was leaning towards refusal, he grew anxious. People tend to be more objective and indifferent when they have no personal stake. But Claremont had already invested a significant amount of money with Anduin, and if the deal fell through, it would be troublesome. He needed to advocate for Silver Flash Trading Company. My lord, you have seen this Silver Flash Trading Company before. We have purchased a large amount of equipment from them. The quality and workmanship of their products are exceptional, something many other alchemy companies cannot match. Claremont began. And the company is backed by the British Ministry of Magic. In the UK, Anduin's Silver Flash Alchemy Development Company has reached a scale comparable to the broom industry and has become a significant part of the UK's trade exports. Moreover, they have trade agreements with Egypt, France, Italy, Romania, and other countries, and their reputation is stellar. From what I heard, besides Germany, Anduin will also visit several other European countries to sign long-term cooperation agreements. I boldly predict that within 3 to 5 years, Silver Flash Commercial Bank's business may spread all over Europe and even reach further countries. This opportunity is very rare for us. We must not miss it. Claremont's tone grew more passionate as he spoke, trying to strengthen his argument. What? Do you owe this company a lot of money? Why are you trying so hard to speak well of it? Silver Spear glanced at Claremont skeptically, as if the Silver Flash Trading Company was his employer. No, my lord, I don't dare to be presumptuous, Claremont said, realizing he had become too excited. He bowed his head in apology, but emphasized, I am considering the future development of the club. With the equipment provided by Silver Flash, our work can progress more smoothly. It seems you have great confidence in this company, Silver Spear remarked with a sneer, and then asked, What do you think of that Anduin? Is he trustworthy? Claremont couldn't help but recall the morning's interaction with Anduin. To be honest, this young man had put a lot of pressure on him, but that only served to confirm Anduin's credibility. After my brief observation of Anduin, I found him to be ambitious, determined, talented, and possessing high emotional intelligence and superb business negotiation skills. He is very experienced, not at all like someone under the age of 20. Claremont admitted, somewhat embarrassed. To be honest, during negotiations, he maintained the upper hand from start to finish. He is very greedy and eager for money. A greedy guy, isn't he? Silver Spear nodded in agreement. No wonder Claremont spoke highly of him. People with distinctive personalities are indeed more reliable. Then Silver Spear looked at Claremont again. Does his new product really benefit the park that much? Show me the badge you mentioned. Yes, my lord. Claremont quickly removed the badge from his chest and handed it over respectfully. At that moment, Silver Spear, who had been submerged in the pitch-black mirror, stepped forward and walked out of the mirror as if it were a corridor, a real tunnel. Silver Spear took the badge, inspected it briefly, and then tossed it back to Claremont. He casually raised his hand and pointed, shooting a jet-black magic bullet from his fingers. It struck the manifested human-shaped iron armor curse. Unlike other magic bullets, this one did not dissipate or spread out upon impact. Instead, it stuck to the magic armor like candy. This was Silver Spear's signature magic, the corruption curse. However, the Guardian badge in Claremont's hand was not an ordinary item. The humanoid armor firmly blocked the progress of the corruption curse, though the curse continued to emit a sizzling sound as it tried to erode the armor. After a while, the corruption curse finally consumed all its magic and dissipated completely. The magic armor remained standing, though a large piece in the center was corroded. It was not pierced by the spell. Well, it can actually resist the corruption curse head-on? Its strength is impressive, Silver Spear remarked, surprised by the badge's performance. He had only used a fraction of his strength, yet the shield was strong enough to be useful even at his level of battle. Claremont was taken aback by Silver Spear's actions. Fortunately, the badge was strong enough, otherwise he would have been injured. He felt a bit dissatisfied with the club's higher-ups. They treated him like a tool, not valuing his life, despite his role in managing a large magical zoo area. Silver Spear, however, saw nothing wrong with his actions. After a moment of thought, he replied to Claremont, If Anduin can consistently provide us with such badges, then a partnership with Silver Flash Trading Company is achievable. How far is your current funding gap? Claremont immediately became excited and quickly replied, The other party asked for an agency fee of 1,000 galleons, a reserve of 5,000, and 5,000 galleons for the first batch of orders. You only need to pay 20% upfront, which is 7,000 galleons. So, the initial costs add up to 2,000 galleons, and I've already paid a deposit of galleons, so... Claremont trailed off, his calculations hanging in the air. That much? Silver Spear frowned as he listened to Claremont's breakdown. Helping to cover a 5,000 galleon shortfall seemed excessive. Silver Spear finally understood why Claremont had described Anduin as extremely greedy. This wasn't just greed, it was practically daylight robbery. Shaking his head firmly, Silver Spear said, 5,000 galleons is too much. The club has other projects that need funding. I can give you 3,000 galleons at most. You'll have to figure out the rest. He added, By the way, after securing the agency contract, the club not only has the priority to dispose of all equipment, but also holds 50% of the dark shares. Only 3,000 galleons? And 50% more? Claremont felt a surge of frustration. These guys were too deceitful. This was a deal he had negotiated, yet they were unwilling to provide sufficient funds, and now wanted to take half the benefits. Despite his dissatisfaction, Claremont knew he couldn't show it. He responded respectfully, "Yes, my lord." Still feeling a bit resentful, he tentatively asked, "Sir, although the initial investment in securing this business is substantial, the follow-up income will be significant. Could this contribution formally allow me to join the club?" Claremont had worked tirelessly for the string, loved for many years, always hoping to become a full-fledged member of the Silver Spear. He was aware of many secrets within the organization, including rumors of a technology that could grant immortality. While he was skeptical about the immortality claim, he believed it could at least prolong life. This was something he deeply desired, but the club's leaders always cited his lack of contribution as an excuse to deny him membership, leaving him unfulfilled for years. End of this chapter. Chapter 494. Puzzled Silver Spear couldn't help but ponder for a moment after hearing Claremont's request. Given Claremont's qualifications, abilities, and the loyalty he has shown in serving the club for so many years, he should have long been qualified to become a Silver Spear. However, since a few years ago, for the sake of Germany's grand strategy, the club has prioritized targeting a few local wizards, tightening the review process for the remaining Silver Spear members. As a result, senior collaborators like Claremont have been left in limbo. Officially, it's due to a lack of merit, but in reality, the club has no intention of including them in the short term. These collaborators are indeed very capable, and if they were promoted too quickly and became Spears, they would no longer be able to serve the club under their current identities. Thus, Silver Spear had no choice but to continue to stall. "You did a good job this time, but we haven't seen the benefits yet, so your formal joining request still cannot be approved. Don't worry about it. We all see your contributions, and after the next stage of our goals is achieved, we will prioritize your request," Silver Spear said, trying to sound reassuring. The shrewd Claremont could tell that he was being stalled, but since the superior had spoken, it would be unwise to press further. He nodded gloomily in agreement. "By the way," Silver Spear changed the topic, "recently there have been many small groups in East and West Germany advocating for reunification. Have you heard any news from your side? Are you talking about small associations like the Berlin United Front? In my opinion, these are just groups of wizards gathered for self-entertainment. Their numbers don't seem to exceed 10, and many of the members are couples from East and West Germany." "It doesn't seem like there's anything noteworthy," Claremont recalled, and then said respectfully, "No." Silver Spear shook his head. "According to our information, these small associations are not as simple as they seem." "Oh? What do you mean? Are there other people supporting them?" Claremont looked at Silver Spear with some surprise. "That's right. Initially, they were just playing around, but it didn't take long for these associations to grow in number and activities. The Berlin United Front you mentioned has expanded to more than 50 people. They have started spending money to promote their cause in major newspapers and magazines. The day before yesterday, they distributed leaflets and gave speeches in 2 wizard communities simultaneously. This is clearly organized behavior," Silver Spear revealed part of what he knew. "At this time, organized protest associations suddenly appearing. Could it be that our recent actions have been too public, causing someone to notice and want to do the opposite?" Claremont's mind raced. Could it be Andre? He has always been an extremist against secession. Maybe he is behind it. "Him? Heh," Silver Spear sneered. "I'm afraid that guy doesn't have the brains for this, or rather, he is not the type to beat around the bush." "Then who else could it be? The other party obviously came prepared." Claremont stroked his beard, deep in thought. "This is what we want to know, but no matter who is behind them, we must prevent these associations from growing further." Silver Spear's tone became increasingly blunt. "What do you mean, my lord?" Claremont knew he was probably being asked to do the dirty work again. "The next time the other party. We're going to have a group activity soon. I'll notify you in advance. Arrange for the West German Endeavor Society to cause a disturbance. It's best if you can provoke a conflict, and you can even use force, but don't kill anyone," the Silver Spear gun instructed, his tone growing colder and more menacing. In short, we need to scare the new members of these associations, indirectly forcing them to withdraw. This will reduce their power and ideally push them to one side of East and West Germany. Claremont nodded in understanding. Understood. This is similar to what we've done before, except we used to involve bystanders during the fights. Now, we'll target them directly. Exactly. You need to control the situation carefully. If you can force the people behind them to reveal themselves, even better. Make sure you can manage the scene to prevent it from getting out of control, the Silver Spear Gun emphasized, despite Claremont's extensive experience with similar tasks. Yes, my lord, Claremont replied respectfully. He hesitated for a moment before adding, By the way, my lord, the funds for the West German Endeavor Association are nearly depleted. You know many people only act when there's money involved. I understand. I'll arrange for additional funds next time, the Silver Spear Gun said, lowering his voice. The club had expanded rapidly over the past 2 years, and the income from the black market was barely enough to sustain it, which frustrated him. Thank you, my lord, Claremont said, satisfied with the club's policy of earmarking funds for specific uses, ensuring no cross-use of fees. One more thing, the Silver Spear Gun continued, placing his hands behind his back. From now on, some magical animals will need to be transported out of Park Number 4 on a regular basis every month. Recount the statistics and mark those that are unpaired or older. Oh, didn't you say the magical animals in the park wouldn't be sold on the black market? Have some big customers appeared? Claremont asked, surprised. Since managing Park Number 4, he had never seen any animals transported out, except for the old ones. Don't ask questions you shouldn't. These magical animals aren't going to the black market. Special personnel will come to receive them, but the latest will be in half a month. Just follow my orders. The Silver Spear Gun snapped impatiently. Yes, my lord. I apologize for my rudeness, Claremont replied, bowing his head respectfully despite his confusion. The Silver Spear Gun softened slightly. Is there anything else you need? If not, I'll be on my way. Claremont thought for a moment before recalling something. By the way, when I was negotiating with Anduin, he mentioned wanting to see you. I promised him I'd pass on the message. He wants to see me? Did he say why? The Silver Spear Gun asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. He didn't recall knowing Anduin. It was just a routine greeting, but he seems interested in opening a branch of Silver Flash Commercial Bank in Germany. Fortunately, you didn't meet with him in time, or I might not have been able to negotiate this business, Claremont explained. I see. It seems this young British entrepreneur has big ambitions, the Silver Spear Gun remarked coldly. I'll handle it. You can tell him I'll arrange a meeting soon. Very well, my lord. There's nothing else to report, Claremont said, bowing respectfully once more. Good. Remember what I told you, the Silver Spear Gun reminded him before departing. Silver Spear nodded slightly, then turned back into the black mirror with a flick of his sleeves. Just as when he arrived, his figure gradually became smaller in the mirror until it disappeared completely. After finally sending Silver Spear away, Claremont heaved a sigh of relief. Although it's not much, it still covers the 3,000 galleon gap. We should be able to make up the remaining 2,000 galleons if we think about it. It's a pity that the deal you got is worth the points, Claremont sighed helplessly. After restoring the darkroom to its original state, he returned to the office outside. For a long period, Claremont handled official duties diligently in his office. On the black market side, he had a secretary who knew many secrets, indicating that he often operated on both sides of the black market and the park. Meanwhile, in Dudden Tower, Hogg and Anduin were looking at each other in front of the monitor, confusion evident in their eyes. My lord, can you see what's going on? Hogg asked Anduin, puzzled. I don't know. This situation is simply unbelievable. Yo, you can tell that the other party's voice is the same as the golden snidget from that day. Anduin replied, understanding Hogg's confusion, but unable to make sense of it himself. Yeah, although he spoke in a different tone when he faced the Fire Ash Snake and when he faced Claremont, his voice and conversation habits are clearly the same, Hogg said, even more puzzled. But Claremont just said clearly that you want to see him, which means Claremont is very sure that the person in front of him is the Minister Pete we often talk about. and through the response of the silver spear, it is as if he admitted that he was Pete. That means we can be sure that Minister Pete is the Snidget himself, Hogg continued. But the problem is that the position of Minister Pete is clearly in the Ministry of Magic. Could it be that he used the Time Turner to frequently appear in two places at the same time, as you said? Hogg looked up at the monitor and then at the location map in his hand, his mind spinning with confusion. No. Anduin shook his head, still unable to accept the idea. No one can use a Time Turner frequently for a long time, and you can be sure that the other party was acting as Pete before entering the Ministry of Magic. I think there must be something hidden here that we don't know. End of this chapter. Chapter 495, Revisiting the Ministry of Magic. Now, I am finding it increasingly difficult to understand this golden snidget. However, at least we have confirmed one thing. Director Andre of the Department of Legal Enforcement is not aligned with the Silver Spear. And the fireplace installed in the dark room, do you think it could be the passage leading to Park Number 1? Hogg analyzed the current known information. It's possible, but let's not act rashly for now. Continue to monitor this Lord Claremont. I believe he will soon reveal the way to enter and leave Park Number 1. Anduin replied with a sneer, confident that the benefits of the badge they had given would soon become apparent. Understood, my lord, Hogg responded, seeing a potential breakthrough and feeling excited. Judging from the reaction of the golden snidget earlier, the Silver Spear is currently struggling to supplement magical animals. Our parks are in chaos because their custody. Hogg sighed and then asked curiously, by the way, my lord, what do you think of the folk associations they mentioned earlier? It seems there is another force opposing them. Do we need to intervene? Anduin shook his head lightly. This is none of our concern. Let's just watch quietly. Our goal is the Silver Spear. I have no intention of getting involved in Germany's internal affairs at the moment. Then their so-called Berlin United Front will be in trouble, and all their efforts might be in vain, Hogg joked with a hint of dark humor. That depends on whether the people behind the Berlin United Front have the courage. Anduin replied non-committally. Oh, do you have other opinions on this matter? Do you think they can still fight back? Hogg tilted his head in surprise. Strictly speaking, the core purpose of this civil activity is to win the support of public opinion. This is what Claremont and the others are so happy about. The easiest way to complete the split is to accumulate hatred. The Silver Spear now controls some folk associations on both sides of East and West Germany. As long as these people have nothing to do and make trouble, it is best to form their own camps, gather crowds to fight, and involve bystanders to spread the hatred. And after such incidents break out, public opinion will inevitably be biased. Based on sympathy and geographical bias, East Germans will support East German associations, and West Germans will support West German associations. This is the simplest logic and exactly what the Silver Spear wants to achieve. Anduin did not answer Hogg's question directly, but instead explained the behavior patterns of these associations. So the more these people make trouble, the bigger the gap between East and West Germany will become. In the end, they will instinctively reject people from the other side, just like the Weom we met before. Is this what you mean? Hogg asked, quickly catching on. Exactly. Then why do you think there will be a change in their actions this time? It doesn't seem any different from the past. Hogg looked at Anduin, puzzled. That's because the people who conflicted with each other before were actually a group of people. Sometimes their so-called conflicts were more like acting, and the degree of it was very easy to control. But now, it's a little different. There are folk associations opposing them, people from East and West Germany who are not controlled by them. It is easy to cause accidents. Don't think that conflicts are easy to extinguish once they are provoked. If someone gets carried away, anything can happen. Anduin sneered again after speaking. And if someone is really manipulating behind them, the situation might deteriorate further, in an active way. Oh, what kind of aggravation method? Hogg still couldn't grasp the intricacies of politics. Hey, it depends on whether the people behind the Berlin United Front. Anduin sneered. If it were up to me, I would arrange for a wizard to use the Imperious Curse to control someone from the West German endeavor, and then have them kill 1 or 2 people at the scene of the conflict, preferably West Germans from the Berlin United Front. Ah, why would you want to control someone from the opposite side to kill their own people? Hog's eyes widened in disbelief. Because this way, the West German endeavor would transform from an ordinary civil organization into a violent gang. The resistance from the Germans would further cause them to lose the support of the West German people, and the same would be true for East Germany. If executed well, it could even stir up a wave of opposition to secession in public opinion, Anduin explained. He had seen many such tactics in his previous life. To put it bluntly, this kind of color revolution is a drama directed and performed by ordinary people, but if someone really disrupts the scene, it will easily collapse. My God, would they really do this? If it's as you expect, then these political guys are too ruthless, Hog said, struggling to understand the method of sacrificing their own people to gain public opinion. So it depends on whether the people behind the other party are ruthless enough. The Silver Spear should also take precautions. The specifics will depend on the outcome of the incident, Anduin replied. He had no intention of getting involved in these matters. He just wanted to be an observer. On the other side, Claremont had been busy all day and had not returned to Park No. 1. However, the black market he managed was also the headquarters of the West German Endeavor Association. As the main collaborator of the Silver Spear, Claremont had a lot on his plate. Not only did he help manage the black market and Park No. 1, but he also had to take care of other industries. It was no wonder that the Silver Spear was unwilling to absorb him into the club as an official member. Claremont's abilities were indeed too strong. He was not only slick in all directions, but also had a high level of management skills. In the eyes of the employees, he was a good boss who was dignified and considerate of his subordinates. In the eyes of the Silver Spear, he was a capable manager who could handle multi-party affairs calmly. In the next 2 days, nothing special happened at the breeding base, with Claremont, or at the Silver Spear headquarters. Claremont had no plans to go to Park No. 1 during these days. He was either managing his own shop or dealing with the black market and the West German Endeavor Association. On the contrary, Anduin received invitation letters from Minister Pete and Director Andre asking him to meet at the Ministry of Magic. This is interesting. Director Andre actually sent out an invitation immediately after Pete sent me one. I don't think it's a coincidence. Does this mean that Director Andre has been paying attention to Minister Pete? Anduin mused as he looked at the 2 invitations with great interest. He decided to take this opportunity to get a good feel for both of them. With that in mind, Anduin didn't delay. After a little packing, he set off for the German Ministry of Magic. The person who received him again was the witch Fushahui at the front desk. Mr. Wilson, I didn't expect us to meet again. The music box you gave me last time was really great. Everyone else in the ministry was envious, Fushahui said, her smile more radiant than before. I'm also very happy to see you again. How have you been these past few days? Anduin asked politely as he handed over Pete's invitation. Hey, don't mention it. More and more people have come to the Ministry of Magic to protest recently, Fushahui sighed helplessly. Are those people causing trouble at the Department of Magical Transportation again? You should find a way to manage it. Letting them break in is not good for administrative efficiency, Anduin said, glancing around. The hall of the Ministry of Magic was bustling with activity. Groups of wizards were scattered around, some distributing leaflets to passers-by, while others held banners and shouted slogans. There were representatives from both East and West German, as well as mixed groups protesting against the division. Among the crowd, Anduin even spotted several goblins, which was quite a rare sight. Although these protesters were merely handing out leaflets and voicing their concerns, their presence had a noticeable impact on the atmosphere. The hall was almost filled to capacity, prompting the ministry to consider sending someone to disperse the crowd. These days are more troublesome than before, Fushahui remarked as he received Anduin's documents. Just 2 days ago, the Department of International Magical Cooperation began dividing its office under Minister Pete's orders. For now, this only affects the International Magic Trade Standards Association Department. This department oversees all merchants and trade within the country. Recently, in addition to ordinary citizens, many merchants have come to protest. If the new policy is implemented, merchants will need to determine whether they belong to East or West Germany and apply for the corresponding business license. This means they might not be able to conduct business with the other side in the future. Although merchants from East and West Germany have generally operated independently, this was an unspoken rule. Now, the ministry wants to formalize these regulations, which many merchants find unacceptable. Some are fiercely resisting the changes. The goblins at Gringotts are particularly troubled. Their bank is located on the East German side, but they have always served clients from both East and West Germany. They are reluctant to spend money to build another bank in West Germany. Fushahui paused, suddenly realizing something. He looked at Anduin with concern. By the way, Mr. Wilson, you came to Germany for business, didn't you? You should be cautious. The International Magic Trade Standards Association is in complete disarray right now. End of this chapter. Chapter 496. An acquaintance. There is such a thing? Anduin couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the news. Recently, he had been focusing on the situation at the breeding base and hadn't paid much attention to any new developments from the Ministry of Magic. It was surprising that Feng, the intelligence merchant, hadn't taken the opportunity to sell this information to him. In Anduin's view, this so-called new policy was just a way to solidify Dudanglu's split. It wasn't just a physical division, it was a step-by-step process. Of course, there would be necessary labor pains, but with Minister Pete's skill, it shouldn't take long for the riots to be quelled. No wonder Pete had been hiding in the Ministry of Magic for so many days, almost never going out. He was busy with this matter, and Anduin now understood why Pete had ignored him for so long. Clearly, the current issues were more important. By the way, Anduin turned to look at Fushahui. Minister Pete announced such a policy. Doesn't the director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation have any objections? How could there be no objections? Director Color was almost mad after learning of Minister Pete's decision. He goes to the minister's office to make trouble every day, but his dissatisfaction is useless. The Wizengamot and half of the ministers agreed to the proposal. Fushahui sighed. Originally, Director Color was a well-known good man in the Ministry of Magic, but this time even he expressed strong dissatisfaction. He might still be arguing with the minister right now. After gossiping with Anduin for a while, Fushahui finally checked his invitation card and realized that Anduin had come to see Minister Pete. My God, you came to meet the minister, and I'm wasting your time here chatting. I'm so sorry. It's okay. Chatting with you is very pleasant. I don't think it's a waste of time, Anduin explained with a smile. You are such a good person. If people knew I was being lazy here, I would probably be scolded again. Fushahui got up and walked ahead to lead Anduin. Please come with me, Mr. Wilson. Anduin actually wanted to inquire more about the Ministry of Magic from Fushahui. After all, naive little girls like her were the hardest to keep their mouths shut. However, after Fushahui learned that Anduin had an appointment with Minister Pete, she stopped wasting time and led him to the minister's office without hesitation. As they arrived outside the office door, they both heard a commotion coming from inside. Dario, the Department of International Magical Cooperation, is not the Department of Magical Communications. You can't let yourself mess around. Do you know how much trouble your order has caused us? Hurry up and revoke this inexplicable decree. A deep voice came from the room, which Fushahui and Anduin heard clearly. This is the Director Color I was talking about, Fushahui whispered, gesturing to Anduin. Seeing this, Anduin raised his eyebrows. He knew from Feng that the director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation was considered a neutral faction in the German Ministry of Magic. It was surprising to see him so angry. But what puzzled Anduin even more was why Minister Pete would risk angering the Department of International Magical Cooperation by issuing such a decree. This could easily push the department to Andre's side. Could it be that because the previous decree went too smoothly, Pete took it lightly? Or maybe he miscalculated Director Color's reaction? Little did Anduin know, his random guess had inadvertently hit upon Pete's true thoughts. At this moment, Pete was in his office, anxiously looking at Director Color. Color stood in front of Pete, his face flushed with anger. Pete couldn't understand how this usually laid-back, good-natured man had suddenly become so furious. Color had never expressed any dissatisfaction with the decree to physically separate Dudenglu before. Why was he reacting so strongly now? However, Pete knew that once a decree was issued, it couldn't be retracted without damaging his prestige. Director Color, the promulgation of the decree is not a joke. This new provision is merely a supplement to the previous policy. Even the Wizengamot Council did not object to it. Before the decree was officially promulgated, you were given a copy of the document, and you didn't express any objections, did you? Pete tried to explain, facing the irate Color. Ha! You have the nerve to say that. The document you sent me was a 200-page slate. In the International Association for Magical Trade Standards, there are separate offices in East and West Germany, and the content about reapplying for business licenses for merchants in Germany only takes up 3 lines of text. Color retorted, slamming his fist on Pete's desk. Tell me, who could find what you wrote in such a document? This is blatant deception. Color didn't want to get involved in the ministry's internal struggles, but he couldn't tolerate being deceived and insulted. But that bill already has your signature. This is an indisputable fact. As a member of the Ministry of Magic, your duty is to implement it. Another middle-aged wizard in the office, Michelle, the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, interjected in a harsh tone. Implementation? Impossible. Color glared at Michelle angrily. Michelle, I'm not like your Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters. I'm not this guy's lackey. Color was too angry to hold back, and his words were harsh. You. Michelle's face turned green with anger, and he stood up, ready to argue. Enough. Pete sneered, glancing at both Color and Michelle. You are senior officials of the Ministry of Magic. Don't act like children. He then looked at Color solemnly. I hope you don't let your emotions dominate your judgment. I will overlook your slip of the tongue this time, but I don't want to hear such words again. As for the legal matter, we will discuss it later. I have other official duties to attend to now, so please return to your work. Color realized he had been too impulsive and had shown no respect to the minister. He could only snort helplessly. Michelle wanted to continue arguing, but Pete stopped him with a look. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Fushahui's voice came from outside. Minister Pete, Mr. Wilson has arrived. Is it convenient for you to see him now? Mr. Wilson, please come in, Pete responded loudly. He then looked at Color and Michelle, especially Color. This guest is a very important foreign visitor. Please don't cause any trouble here. I will resolve your issues later. He gave Color a serious look. Color had no choice but to get up and leave. Michelle followed, but kept a noticeable distance, indicating the enmity between them. As they exited, Anduin, who was outside, took the opportunity to observe the 2 senior officials of the German Ministry of Magic. Director Color was tall and imposing, but he looked older, with a head full of white hair. He was at least 70 years old, but still appeared energetic. He wore an angry expression, clearly in a bad mood. Director Michelle, who followed behind him, looked younger, around 40 years old, with a well-proportioned figure and a well-trimmed mustache on his upper lip. Unlike Director Cooler Chu Shen, Michelle's expression was not bitter. As he passed by Anduin, he smiled and greeted him. Anduin, with his strong memory, immediately recognized Director Michelle as an acquaintance he had encountered earlier. Michelle was the poison leopard who had appeared at the headquarters of the Silver Spear. He hadn't made any effort to disguise his appearance or voice, making it easy for Anduin to identify him. Just as I suspected, Anduin thought to himself. Most of the top executives of the Ministry of Magic have been corrupted by the club. Since Michelle is the poison leopard, then the director of the Department of Magical Transportation, who is in the same camp as Pete, and the director of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures must all, so, be part of the club. Anduin nodded to himself, not surprised by this revelation. However, the conflict between Chief Color and Pete did not seem staged, indicating that Color and the Silver Spear were not allied. After quickly reviewing the information he had gathered, Anduin walked into the minister's office as if nothing were amiss. "Good day, Minister Pete. I'm sorry to disturb your work," Anduin greeted. "Oh, I should be the one apologizing," Pete responded, his demeanor much friendlier than before. He stood up and warmly greeted Anduin, leading him to a seat. "I'm sorry to make you witness that scene. Those were just some minor disputes within our department. I hope you don't take offense." Pete was referring to the earlier commotion. He had sensed Anduin and the others' arrival and knew that Culler's loud outburst would have been heard by those outside. "Not at all," Anduin replied with a smile, unsure if he was joking or being sincere. "I am quite envious of the German Ministry of Magic. The officials here are so energetic. If this were the UK, the Ministry of Magic would be dominated by Minister Budnow, and everyone would seldom express their opinions. It can feel quite dull and boring." End of this chapter. Chapter 497, Minister Pete of Awe-Inspiring Righteousness. Haha, I should be the one envious. If I had the prestige of Minister Budnow, I wouldn't be criticized so much now. Pete laughed at himself, quite generously. Seeing Pete's flexibility, Anduin could only reply with a smile. "Minister Pete, you are truly generous. Under your leadership, the German Ministry of Magic is bound to prosper." "Mr. Wilson, don't flatter me," Pete responded, knowing that the young man in front of him was not easy to deal with. "I learned from Claremont that you will have a long-term relationship with him. This is a great thing for the development of Germany." Pete knew that Claremont highly valued the cooperation with Silver Flash Trading Company, so he especially hoped that this matter would be finalized in this meeting, which could be seen as helping his senior collaborator. "Ha ha! Is that what Your Excellency Claremont said?" "In fact, this matter has not been finalized yet," Anduin said noncommittally, even though he had already gained an advantage. "Is this kid still hesitating?" Pete thought to himself. This kid is really cunning, taking money without doing anything. "I think cooperating with Claremont is a win-win for you, him, and even for the entire German business. Do you have any hesitation?" Pete gave Anduin a firm look, seemingly wanting to make up his mind for him. "It's not that I don't want to confirm the intention of cooperation, it's just—" Anduin put on a conflicted expression. "I just heard that there have been some changes in Germany's trade policy. To be honest, I'm a little worried. Will my business in Germany get into trouble because of this?" "Haha, Mr. Wilson, you are worrying too much." Pete smiled and waved his hands. "The newly promulgated decree is only to determine the ownership of the major merchants. In fact, there is no change from the past." "Is that so?" Anduin was still a little hesitant. But the business environment in Germany is changing too fast, and new policies appear every once in a while. According to Lord Claremont, Germany may split into East Germany and West Germany soon. Then I would have to find agents in both regions. But judging from what I've seen in Germany now, it seems that the voices against secession are also very strong. What if Germany remains a unified state in the end? You must know that I am going to sign a long-term contract. If there are two agency partners in Germany, am I asking for trouble? And even if the division is finally completed, the newly promulgated decree requires domestic merchants to choose whether they belong to East Germany or West Germany and reapply for business licenses. But there seems to be no provision in the decree that this choice cannot be changed. What if Mr. Claremont accepts my contract and then returns to East Germany to operate within 2 years, or opens a branch in East Germany in a different way? I can't stop them from expanding their business, right? This would mean I have agents in both East and West Germany, which will bring us endless troubles. You are not a business person, so you may not understand our difficulties. I just hope that my business can develop in a stable environment, and I don't want to see any extra problems." Anduin gave Pete a detailed breakdown of his concerns, all of which had their own merits. Even Pete couldn't help but secretly nod in agreement. Anduin's considerations were very comprehensive. If he were in Anduin's position, he might not be able to make a decision right away either. However, in order to secure Anduin's cooperation as soon as possible, Pete advised, "I think you don't have to be so conflicted. First of all, it is the general trend for the German wizarding world to split into 2 countries. The protests you've seen are all about fighting for profit," Pete began. I can tell you the truth here. Currently, more than 80% of the merchants in Germany have no objection to the new decree. The only ones with significant concerns are enterprises like Gringotts and Morin Books. I assure you, their conflicts will be resolved within a week. As for your worries about agents like Claremont bringing changes, I can take the lead in signing a subsidiary agreement to ensure they won't change the registration area during their cooperation with you. Additionally, when expanding to neighboring countries, they must not bring your alchemy business there to avoid disrupting the local market. I promise that as long as you sincerely cooperate with local merchants, the German Ministry of Magic will back you and protect your interests from infringement. Pete's confidence was impressive, especially considering this was their first meeting. Anduin couldn't help but give Pete a surprised look. I'm honored by your support. It would be great if the Ministry of Magic in all countries had your dedication, but he paused to gather his thoughts. But are you so confident that Germany will complete its division? Even within the Ministry of Magic, there must be differing opinions. Pete understood Anduin was referring to the former director Kuller. He looked at Anduin with gentle yet firm eyes. If you walk around the civilian wizard communities and Dudden Tower, or read the major German newspapers, you'll see that the division between East and West Germany has long been the will of the people. What I have done is merely follow their will. People like Director Kuller are just old-fashioned, conservative, and unwilling to accept change. I don't blame them, but the final decision follows the principle of the majority. The division process may be fast or slow, but it will happen. Pete's eyes were resolute as he spoke. Anduin couldn't help but think that Minister Pete was quite persuasive. If he were in a big company in the Muggle world, he would undoubtedly be a master of persuasion. Anduin resisted the urge to complain and asked sharply, if that's the case, will the German Ministry of Magic also be divided into two parts? What will the divided Ministry of Magic look like? What if there are changes in policies and laws after the division? Pete chuckled. Anduin, you don't mind if I call you that, do you? I find that you see things very thoroughly. I can tell you the truth in advance. The Ministry of Magic will naturally be divided soon. Each department is gradually being split into two offices to pave the way. However, the Ministry of Magic will still be established on the basis of the original office. Policies and laws will not change too much, at least not in the part under my jurisdiction. The part under your jurisdiction? Anduin raised an eyebrow. So, after the division, you'll still be the minister of one of the ministries of magic? Aren't you reducing your own power? And who will be the minister on the other side after the split? That's right. After the division, I will remain in the position of Minister of Magic for a few more years to resolve all follow-up issues. For the happiness of all wizards and people, what's the point of mere power? Pete looked at Anduin with determination. As for the Minister of Magic on the other side, that has not been decided yet. The division won't be completed quickly, so there's no need to be too nervous. I see. It seems you have considered everything, Anduin replied, impressed by Pete's foresight. Anduin nodded in admiration. But I don't quite understand what you mentioned earlier about the solution for Gringotts and other companies. It seems like dividing their business into two parts isn't feasible. Hearing Anduin steer the conversation back to the merchants, Pete felt a pang of anxiety. This young man might have caught on to something. These entrepreneurs have substantial businesses, and even the Dudden building occupies a vast area. It is indeed challenging for them to split their operations hastily. Therefore, we plan to establish a neutral area to accommodate these merchants, Pete explained. He had already discussed this with some merchants, so it wasn't a big secret. He couldn't hide it from Anduin any longer. Oh, a neutral area, Anduin repeated with great interest. Since there's such a beneficial policy, why didn't you mention it earlier? Our Silver Flash Trading Company seems well suited for such an arrangement. Perhaps I could open a branch here. What do you think? Pete grew more concerned. He feared that if Anduin opened a branch directly, they would sell goods themselves, undermining the club's covert operations and significantly reducing their profits. The neutral area is intended for large companies that have been operating locally for a long time. Although your Silver Flash trading company is quite large, it hasn't fully entered the local market yet, so Pete advised tactfully. Why take a detour when there's a straightforward path? Anduin countered, ignoring Pete's reasoning. If you allow our Silver Flash trading company to open a branch in the neutral area, I can donate 5,000 galleons to you as a political contribution, and another 5,000 galleons for the store fee. 5,000 plus 5,000? Is this initial investment really 10,000 galleons? Pete was stunned by Anduin's bold offer. He realized that Anduin's business might be more extensive and influential than he had imagined, which explained his confidence. However, this only made Pete more determined not to let Anduin open a branch. End of this chapter. Chapter 498, Political Maneuvering. Anduin, your generosity has truly opened my eyes, but I sincerely hope that you can place your business in both East and West Germany, Pete said, his tone shifting from excitement to a more serious and sincere demeanor. Oh, may I know why? Anduin asked, curious about the sudden change in Pete's attitude. It's like this. If East and West Germany can secure your distribution contract during this period, it would signify that wizards around the world have confidence in the German business community. This would be a great morale boost for most wizards in the area, Pete explained, his expression and eyes revealing extreme sincerity. So I implore you to invest in both East and West Germany. Although this is a small wish of mine, and I admit I have my own selfish reasons, it is also for the overall good of Germany. If Anduin were truly a businessman solely focused on business, he might have agreed on the spot, swayed by the sincerity of a country's Minister of Magic. However, Anduin was not just any businessman. He saw through Pete's intentions, recognizing it as a strategic play to appear weak and set him up, making it seem like he was being unreasonable if he refused. Despite this, Anduin couldn't help but admire Pete, or Golden Snidget. His acting skills were superb. If Anduin hadn't known Pete's background, he might have been fooled. It was no wonder Pete had climbed to the position of Minister of Magic. His ability to adapt and strategize was far superior to Claremont's. Your generosity is admirable, Anduin responded, careful not to agree immediately, but also not wanting to offend Pete. I must admit, I am moved by your proposal. However, I still can't give you a clear answer right now. I need to think it over carefully. That's understandable, Pete replied, not showing any anger at Anduin's hesitation. After all, you are responsible for a large family business, and caution is necessary. But I can promise you in advance that if you invest in both East and West Germany, the Ministry of Magic will do its utmost to protect your interests and offer some tax incentives. That sounds very appealing, Anduin said, showing interest. I promise you, within a week to half a month, I will give you a final answer. Very well. I look forward to hearing good news from you or from Claremont, Pete said, standing up with a smile and personally escorting Anduin out of the office. As soon as Anduin left, Pete's expression turned grim. This young man is even more difficult than Claremont described. He still didn't give a definitive answer. Pete pondered whether Anduin had been involved in the club's defeat in the UK. Anduin's strength and deep mind were evident, and the alchemy equipment he produced was highly effective. His cooperation with the British Ministry of Magic from the beginning might have led to his eventual success. Pete decided he needed to consult Thunderbird at the next Changfeng meeting for more clarity. While Anduin's conversation with Pete seemed focused on business, both men had ulterior motives. Pete was still brooding over the failure of the British branch and used this meeting to test Anduin. After their first confrontation, Pete realized that this young wizard was far more complex than he appeared. The door of Pete's office was knocked on again. It turned out to be Michelle, the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, who had returned. How did it go? Did the conversation with Anduin go well? I bumped into him just as he was leaving, and he seemed to be in a good mood, Michelle asked immediately upon entering the room. Pete nodded slightly, but then shook his head hesitantly. The process was very harmonious, but the result, I can only say that Anduin is not as simple as we imagined. He is a difficult guy. If you run into him in the future, don't treat him like a child. Oh, I didn't expect you to give him such a high evaluation, but no matter what, he's just a businessman. We won't suffer. Michelle said dismissively. That's the reason, Pete responded, then looked at Michelle specifically. By the way, did Anduin leave the Ministry of Magic right after he got into office? It doesn't seem to be the case. From the direction he moved, it seems that he is going to the Legal Enforcement Department, Michelle recalled after a moment. Going to the Law Enforcement Department? Pete narrowed his eyes gloomily. This kid is really not simple. It seems he has found out that Andre is against us. What? You mean that Anduin went to find Andre? Besides this reason, what else would he go to the Law Enforcement Department for? No wonder he asked me who will become the minister on the other side after the split. Then, why did he go to the Law Enforcement Department to find Andre? Michelle also reacted and thought of something, just to bet on both ends. First, curry favor with me, then establish a good relationship with Andre. This way, no matter what the situation of the German Ministry of Magic is, he will not suffer. This little bastard has a good plan. Pete snorted coldly, thinking he had seen through Anduin's thoughts. Then Pete looked at Michelle again. Speaking of Andre, have you talked to him? What's his answer? I did. I told him clearly that as long as he stops opposing us and supports our division bill, we will fully support him as the Minister of Magic of East Germany. But that guy is stubborn. He didn't respond to my kind words and advice, and he almost beat me up, Michelle yelled angrily at the thought. This was expected. I sent you just to test the waters, Pete sneered. If he had agreed, it would have been more troublesome. It would mean he has new helpers or aides behind him. Now it's safer for us to show him that way. But Cooler's reaction is also a little excited now. Will he fall directly to Andre's side? Michelle asked, recalling Cooler's expression. Haha, you are so naive, Pete chuckled. Don't you see it? That guy is just making excuses. That's right. Cooler was very angry before, but an old hand like him is not a fool. He knows that no matter how much trouble he makes, the law will not be revoked easily. So he made such a big fuss with us to vent his anger and seek compensation. Otherwise, why would he come to the office to talk nonsense with us? Wouldn't it be easier to go directly to the newspaper to publish an article condemning us? Besides, that guy has a good network. He could call a few more people and make things go awry. Seek compensation? According to you, should we give him a response? Michelle looked at Pete with some puzzlement. Although he was the deputy director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters many years ago, his political sense was still not as sharp as Pete's. Of course, there must be compensation. Otherwise, he will really do what I said before. And not only compensation, but also the best opportunity to draw him to our side, Pete concluded. Pete sneered slyly. So, the position of Minister of Magic promised to Andre is just a bait. In reality, Keller is the one we truly need to win over, right? But I had such an unpleasant quarrel with him before. Will that be a problem? Michelle looked at Pete with some confusion. No, he's not a child. Do you think he's really naive when I call him naive? Trust me, as long as he reaches a tacit understanding with us, this old guy will forget everything that happened before, Pete reassured Michelle. Keller is indeed not childish, but you, on the other hand, are somewhat involved. You people, your hearts are so dirty, even that young Anduin, Michelle said, looking away speechlessly. Then she frowned and looked back at Pete. But what about Andre? That guy is not easy to deal with. If he gets desperate, he might fight us. Thinking of this, Michelle seemed to have an idea. Otherwise, let's act first and directly. She raised her hand to her neck in a slicing motion and then slapped her face ferociously. Is your mind full of nonsense? Pete couldn't help but give her a blank look. Do ye know how much trouble assassinating a director of the Ministry of Magic would bring us? It would add so much uncertainty to the situation, and facing a senior Auror who can guarantee to kill him without leaving any trace? Are you going to do it? I'm naturally not the one to do it, but the Thunderbird who gave me the promotion assessment that day is quite suitable, Michelle replied honestly. That guy's strength is simply unimaginable. If he makes the move. If it's up to him. Pete immediately interrupted Michelle. Andre would indeed be dead, but the Thunderbird guy would also burn half of Berlin to ashes. Is that what you want to see? End of this chapter. Chapter 499. It was my own person. Is that guy really that exaggerated? If so, why do you still let him handle British affairs? Michelle asked, a bit speechless after hearing Pete's description. Haven't you experienced his style once? If you enjoy being defeated by him, I can arrange for you to work with him, Pete replied, giving Michelle a mocking look. Michelle shuddered at the proposal and shook his head frantically. He had no desire to work with that kind of person. As for letting him handle British affairs, it's a natural decision. Despite his special personality, he has outstanding military strength and extensive experience in handling matters, Pete explained. He has always been a pioneer in the club. More than half of our territory in Europe and America was won by the Thunderbirds. When it comes to establishing a new branch, he is the obvious choice. I don't believe the loss of the British branch was due to his negligence. Pete's trust in his former comrade, Thunderbird, was evident. After chatting with Michelle a bit more, Pete got back to business. Meanwhile, Anduin followed the path to the Department of Legal Enforcement and finally met the director in his office. Facing this wizard, who had been at odds with Pete, Anduin needed to test if there was any chance of him becoming an ally. You are Anduin Wilson, the head of Silver Flash Trading Company. You look young. Come and sit down, Andre said. He was a middle-aged man with a strong build, wearing a loose formal suit. His mottled white hair at the temples showed his age, and his fleshy face made him look fierce. He scrutinized Anduin closely. Anduin didn't show any discomfort in front of this seemingly difficult wizard. Compared to his old acquaintance Moody, Andre's fierce appearance was almost handsome. Hello, Director Andre. It's a great honor to receive your invitation, Anduin said, taking off his top hat and sitting down courteously. Oh, is that right? Then why did you meet our minister first after arriving at the Ministry of Magic? Andre asked rudely. There was no other way. I received the invitation letter from Minister Pete first. If you had sent the invitation first, I would have come to see you first, Anduin replied, making up a reason to deflect the question. I didn't expect you to be so glib at such a young age, Andre sneered. I don't need to hear so much official nonsense. I know why you came to Germany, your real purpose. Oh, I don't know what you mean. The purpose of my coming to Germany is to expand business. Isn't this well known? Anduin responded cautiously. Anduin, don't beat around the bush like Amelia. I'll tell you clearly, Andre said, pointing at Anduin. You were sent by the Merlin Sirs to track down the Silver Spear Club. I didn't expect them to send someone so young, which makes me uncertain of your capabilities and trustworthiness. That's why I haven't officially met you. This time, I just borrowed Pete's opportunity to meet you casually. Anduin raised his brows in surprise. This result was indeed unexpected. Andre was actually in the same group as Sir Merlin, meaning he was an ally from the beginning. Before coming, Scamander had mentioned that someone would help him here, but never disclosed the specifics. It turned out Newt was referring to Andre. Although this situation was unexpected, it was also reasonable. After all, Sir Merlin knew that the Silver Spear was tricky, and there must be a corresponding source of information in Germany. At that time, Anduin wondered why Scamander and the others were reluctant to disclose more information. It turned out that the director of the law enforcement department of a country was cooperating with them. This sensitive identity really cannot be known by too many people. As the director of the legal enforcement department, who has been operating in Germany for decades, it is not surprising that Andre found something secretly, not to mention that this is his base camp. However, this guy had to ask for help. It seems that Andre's situation here is not very good. Compared to this, Anduin simply and rudely expressed his distrust of him, but Anduin did not express any dissatisfaction. After all, in the eyes of Anduin, he was just a kid who had just graduated, and being a little suspicious was also normal. But Anduin still teased a little. So that's the case, then why are you willing to meet me again now and tell me these things? Andre saw that the other party was still so calm after being exposed by him, and he was a little impressed. He was sure that the Merlin Sirs must not have disclosed their information to Anduin. Lengshan can also prove this point. It seems that what Amelia said is really good. This kid has something. Andre nodded secretly in his heart. Then he grinned. I am willing to see you today, not because I have changed my mind about you, but because I have received a letter from Newt. Mr. Scamander's letter? Anduin immediately understood when he heard the words. It seems that he has shared some information with you. That's right. I didn't expect you to be so powerful. You actually grabbed the tail of the club within a few days after you came here. Newt has already explained it clearly to me, asking me to help you as much as possible. I can apologize to you for any dissatisfaction, but I am even more sorry because my character will not change, Andre said bluntly. Mr. Andre, you are open-minded. I'm not that kind of stingy person. Anduin felt a little amused looking at the strong man in front of him. This guy's personality is quite similar to Moody's. Since that's the case, tell me exactly what you found after you arrived in Germany and what plans you have in the future. I don't like to play that kind of roundabout game. Andre saw Anduin's attitude and his favor and trust in him also increased a little. Okay, but before that, please forgive me for being rude for a moment. Anduin replied with a smile and then slowly closed his eyes. Andre, who was sitting across from him, found that the moment Anduin closed his eyes, he instantly released a powerful and concentrated mental force and quickly swept through his office. After about 10 seconds, Anduin slowly opened his eyes. Well, your office is safe, and there is no trace of monitoring magic, but you have hidden so many looking glasses in the room, it seems that you still have some reservations about trusting me. At this time, Andre was looking at Anduin with eyes like looking at a monster. The perception magic that this kid just used was ridiculously high. It seems that this guy, apart from the maturity mentioned by Amelia, in addition to being stable and thoughtful, his strength should not be underestimated. As for Anduin's mention of the looking glass, Andre admitted it carelessly. What's the matter? You can't be too careful when facing strangers whose identity is unknown. Otherwise, you think I'll just rely on Newt to say a few good things about you, so you have no reservations. Unable to tell that this Andre is still a rough guy, Anduin smiled slightly. I don't have any dissatisfaction with this, but you won't blame me for my previous cautious behavior. Stop talking nonsense. Andre shook his hands vigorously. That's enough for the tentative talk. Let's get down to business. No problem. Anduin nodded approvingly. Communicating with someone like Andre can indeed save a lot of trouble. After organizing his thoughts, Anduin decided to share some serious information. Your Minister Pete has a problem, he stated. However, Andre didn't show any surprise. Instead, he added, it's not just that there are problems. There are many problems with him. I will contact Sir Merlin. If it weren't for the lack of evidence, I would have taken those bastards down long ago. You wouldn't just be talking nonsense with me, would you? It seems you know a lot of information. No wonder the Jazz Group attaches so much importance to the Silver Spear headquarters, Anduin replied, unfazed by Andre's rudeness. If I tell you that Minister Pete is probably the leader of the Silver Spear dueling claw, what would you say? What? That's impossible. Andre's eyes widened in shock. He had some clues about Pete's collusion with the club, but he had always thought Pete was using the power of the Silver Spear, such as funds or manpower, to achieve some ulterior purposes, like splitting Germany or consolidating power. Andre had even considered whether Pete was being used or controlled by the Silver Spear to become the club's smuggling crimes umbrella. He had thought about seeking assistance from abroad to eradicate the opponent's leader and the German headquarters. But it had never occurred to him that Pete could be the man behind the Silver Spear and the leader of the club. Do you know what you're saying? This is a malicious accusation against the Minister of Magic of a country. It is an absolutely intolerable felony. Andre glared at Anduin aggressively. And Pete was a German I have known for years. I can assure you that his behavior has been consistent over the past 10 years. He has definitely not been replaced by an imposter. Chapter 500, Cooperation. You misunderstood. What I mean is not that Pete was impersonated by the leader of the club, but that he has been a Silver Spear from the very beginning and is very likely the leader of this organization, Anduin explained with a slight smile. You mean? Andre's eyes widened in disbelief. This guy has been disguising his identity for more than 10 years? He's been playing everyone for fools? After pondering for a moment, Andre shook his head in denial. It doesn't make sense. Wouldn't the leader of a transnational criminal organization be afraid of being discovered if he took such a risk? And he even entered the Ministry of Magic openly to take up politics. That's exactly where his brilliance lies. You don't understand the principle of hiding in plain sight. The more dangerous the place he stays, the safer he is. Think about it. Before Pete appeared more than 10 years ago, can you find any specific information about him? Anduin asked, looking at Andre with a knowing smile. After being reminded by Anduin, Andre finally realized the truth. Yes, Pete had almost never mentioned his life before the age of 40 to anyone. They didn't even know which magic school he attended. Pete had appeared as an expert in charms from the very beginning and quickly integrated into the upper circles of the German magical community. Everyone took it for granted that he was a well-mannered, humorous wizard. You don't need to think about the past anymore. I have investigated his background in detail. Pete did not publish any papers related to spells before the age of 40. Although there were records of his previous life, they were all on paper. Anyone who saw him in his youth is either dead or missing without a trace. Doesn't that explain the problem? Anduin had done extensive research after arriving in Germany, especially after learning about Pete's identity. He had even paid a lot of money to ask Feng for help with the investigation, but Feng had not shown up for a long time. But why did he do this? Pete has been acting normally for so many years. Except for wanting to split Germany, he could even be called quite diligent. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. How could he have so much time to deal with the Silver Spear? Andre raised his doubts again. Pete had been working and living under his nose for many years. If it weren't for political discord, Andre would have admired Minister Pete. The time management of the other party is indeed a little inconsistent. I am still investigating this, but isn't the reason obvious? I thought you could judge it yourself, Anduin pointed out. If Minister Pete continues like this, what do you think Germany will look like in the near future? You mean, his purpose since more than 10 years ago has been to divide Germany. Andre followed Anduin's train of thought and then widened his eyes. If he is really the leader of the Silver Spear, then he wants to build a country completely controlled by smuggling criminal groups. But what's his motive? Why did Pete and the Silver Spear spend so many years weaving such an extremely difficult conspiracy? Do they have any special ambitions? Andre looked at Anduin, still puzzled. Isn't their ambition very obvious? Recall their original identities, especially from 60 years ago, Anduin said persuasively. 60 years ago? Andre quickly recalled that sensitive time. By the way, their predecessor was indeed the Saints Party. Yes, it is a reasonable motive to overthrow the secrecy law. Your idea is similar to that of Baduo and Amelia, but I didn't expect that they want to control a country for this. Seeing Andre's realization, Anduin nodded in agreement. It was impossible for him to reveal the connection between magical animals and the elixir, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. Anduin wanted to use reality to measure everyone's moral bottom line. If people knew that the club had a method to make them live forever, who could say if these seemingly decent wizards wouldn't have bad ideas? This secret, Anduin decided, would remain hidden in his heart. As for dealing with Andre and others, hadn't he figured it out by now? For these older generation wizards, the glory and destructive power of the Saint Party were unforgettable. As long as they connected the Silver Spear with Grindelwald and the Saints, any conspiracy theory could be imagined. Your information is quite unexpected, but do you have any concrete evidence about Pete? Andre asked, still skeptical. Although Anduin had induced him to imagine a set of club behavior logic, it was only one-sided. Seeing is believing, after all. You know Claremont, right? Anduin asked in return. The Claremont who opened the magic item shop? Andre nodded affirmatively. I know that this person is related to the Silver Spear and helps the club run a black market. But after my previous investigations, this guy should just be a collaborator of the Silver Spear. Andre was quite familiar with the organization of the Silver Spear. Both sides' home bases were in Germany, and they had clashed more than once over the years. Moreover, after many years of dealing with each other, Andre had also mastered a lot of inside stories about the Silver Spear. He knew that the official members of this organization were rare and usually used codenames to communicate. Much of the day-to-day work was done by their collaborators, and Claremont was one of them. But because of this, although Andre had killed and arrested many members of the Silver Spear over the years, he had not been able to grasp more information about the personnel of this organization. Just like when Anduin captured Izeron, he only understood some of their internal architecture. However, over the years, Andre had discovered a lot of tricks about the Silver Spear. For example, they basically used the Saints' elders as their original team, and these people had close ties with the Saints. The scope of their smuggling business was very large, and the monthly flow of magical animals was exaggerated, making the Silver Spear Club no secret in Germany. Most civilian wizards just regarded them as a gray business organization, like Nocturne Alley in Britain, and even some regular magical animal shops dealt with them. That's right. Through some special channels, I learned that this Claremont is not just a partner of the Silver Spear. He also manages a huge magical animal breeding park for the club, and I am very sure he knows the identity of Minister Pete, Anduin revealed. Oh, Claremont has such a complicated identity? It was the first time Andre had heard about the breeding park, and he was furious. Then what are we waiting for? Let's arrest Claremont now and have him confront Pete on the spot. Director Andre, aren't you a little too naive? Anduin couldn't help rolling his eyes at Andre's impulsiveness. Since you know something about the Silver Spear, you should also know their secret methods. This so-called confession is meaningless. I bet you can't even get the location of the breeding park from him. After being stopped by Anduin, Andre finally realized that the memories of these Silver Spear members were protected by specific contract magic. It wasn't that he had never caught one before, but except for some surface information, he couldn't dig out what was in their heads at all. Then what do you suggest? Andre asked, seeing Anduin's confident look and recalling the letter Newt had sent him. It seemed this kid really had something to say, so he could be so confident. Regarding Claremont, I hope you don't take any action, so as not to startle the enemy. This guy is already under my surveillance, Anduin explained. Anduin remained unfazed by Andre's skepticism. You don't know anything yet, he said, making his request clear. Do nothing? Even ordinary surveillance isn't enough. Is your so-called comprehensive surveillance reliable? Andre eyed Anduin suspiciously. This young man, with his smooth face, didn't inspire much confidence. No, Anduin replied firmly. I've been following his trail and discovered a breeding park managed by Claremont. The security there is extremely tight. I'm still figuring out a way to infiltrate without alerting the enemy. We need to steal their secrets and get out undetected. Andre nodded, considering Anduin's plan. So, you know where the park is? Why don't we just storm in and wipe them out? I know you have some impressive equipment, like the device that can cast the anti-apparition spell. With that, none of them would be able to escape. It's not that simple, Anduin said, shaking his head. I've learned that apparition is impossible within the park itself. However, they have other means to leave undetected. Anduin paused, looking directly at Andre. Do you know how many people are in this breeding park? How many? Andre asked, curiosity piqued. According to my current information, there are at least 220 people, including over 100 wizards. Are you confident that you can take them down with just the aurors from the law enforcement department? Anduin's tone was mocking as he glanced at Andre. End of this chapter.